capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. But I would say on a deeper level, it's more like when we say work on yourself. That involves all kinds of like things about moving your life forward. And they struggle with
motivation in these things.
It's because when I don't think I'm worth it, I'm not worth fixing. Alrighty, chat. Let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. So welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday. So today we're going to be talking with someone super, super awesome. We're going to be talking with Seth Johnson from the Warrior Gamer Foundation. So Seth is an Army veteran who is part of this awesome organization called the Warrior Gamer Foundation. And the Warrior Gamer Foundation is devoted to supporting veterans with their mental health. They do a lot of super, super cool stuff around community building, like kind of very comprehensive wellness, mental health support, peer support. So they're an awesome, awesome organization. And I've done a lot of veteran work in a past life and love working with veterans. So I think we're going to be talking with Seth today about being a gamer and being a veteran. Before we hop in, though, I know there was an election yesterday in the United States of America, and the election was quite charged politically. So a quick heads up that, you know, we're not really a political stream. You know, after we're done with our work with Seth today, so in a couple of hours, like if y'all are super, super interested, we can talk a little bit about it, about, you know, what I think is going on politically and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, our focus on this channel has always been mental health. And that's what it's kind of going to stay. And so, you know, I think we are going to potentially alter our moderation settings. But one of the things that I want to, in terms of, if you guys decide that you guys want to talk politics at the end for a little while, we can absolutely do that. But one of the things I just wanted to make super clear to y'all is like, that's not what this conversation is about. right? So this conversation is really focused on our core mission here at Healthy Gamer and the core mission of the Warrior Gamer Foundation, which is not political at all. It's like people need mental health support, and we want to talk about that in the way that we always do. It just so happened that there was an election yesterday. And so if y'all have, if you guys want to talk about that, we'll do that totally fine, but it's going to be after we're done with the very important work that we have to do today. Okay. Okay. So let's hop in with Seth. Oh, don't need that. Okay. Seth, you can hear me okay, right? And does that, oh, hold on, give me a second. Let's go. Yes. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you. Thanks. Glad to be here.
It's an honor to have you, man.
It's an honor to be here, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the Warrior Gamer Foundation and what kind of work y'all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Warrior Gamer Foundation is a community that is built off of a nonprofit called Warrior Gamer Foundation. And we promote mental health and camaraderie within our community. We host weekly community game nights, provide a safe space for people to get together, just talk, and even connect about the way they're feeling in some situations. We also have a peer-to-peer connect as well, a program set up to where people can connect to a ticket-based system where they can talk about the issues that they're having in life, whether that be something that's going to be detrimental or like a life or death situation, or if it's just you're having a really rough day, you have somebody to reach out to. We have people on staff that are able to answer your questions or help you address the issues that you're facing that day. And we're working on a lot of other great initiatives. We got a couple in-person events coming down the line. We got one coming up this
Super
weekend, actually, in Syracuse, New York. It is our Veterans Day Duel of Champions. It's we're going to be playing Rocket League at the university over there in Syracuse. And we also have a stream event for charity on Sunday. Starts at 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It'll be live on Twitch as well, where veterans and their families and friends can get in there and they can play in some of these lobbies for a chance to win some prizes.
That's awesome, man. Sounds like you guys are doing in-person stuff, online stuff. Rocket League, are y'all going to be playing particular games on Sunday? Like
on Sunday, we have on the schedule, we have slotted Apex Legends. Either it's going to be Party Animals or another party game on top. Fall Guys, I believe it's the other game that we're going to be playing. And then for the show match, we have the Ukrainian esports team flown out to California, and they will be playing against a U.S. esports team that is comprised of veterans.
That's really, really cool. So it's super cool, man. So let me ask you, so I've noticed that there's an overlap between gamers and veterans. Like, what's the deal with that?
I believe that it stems with the generational expansion that we made. So we've gone from the old traditional vet where they would traditionally, after service would go hang out at the VFW, have a few drinks and things of that sort. We're coming into this new generation where the veterans are more game oriented. They grew up in like the evolution of technology. So they grew up playing games. That's what they've associated with. And then as they went through the military, gaming became kind of that safety net. And as they exited the military, that's where their safe space was, is where I found that personally in my own journey is that I found that gaming has been a safe space. It's always been like an outlet, a place where you can hang out with others who are like-minded, regardless of whether they're a veteran or not. But the fact that you're able to gather and get together with veterans who have the same experiences is also a really great benefit. And that's one of the things I found with Warrior Gamer.
Yeah. So tell me, what makes gaming a safety net when you're in the military?
When you're in the military, it's an escape. That's honestly what it is. If you're going day in, day out, long days, you're on post in garrison and like you have these demands and everything from me all day. It's good to have that release, like a place where you can let your mind go at ease, not have to deal with the daily troubles of life. You just escape.
So I imagine a lot of people, myself included, don't know what a day in the life of like an active, like, what is that? Like, what are you escaping from? Like, what does your day look like?
From the start, military service, you are trained from day one, restructured like mentally, like from the ground up, to become a soldier. And like the expectations of you become far greater. Like it's pretty straightforward, do as you told, but that's a lot of pressure on you because you're not used to being told like what to do in a lot of scenarios. Like it's going from everyday life as a civilian where you get the free will to pick and choose what you want to do to doing as you're told. And if you're not doing what you're told, then there's repercussions behind that. You signed up for this, of course, but there's a lot of mental pressure, like a lot of like, scenarios where like it just feels like a burden at some point in time.
Can you give us an example of that? Because I think it's so foreign to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. For an example is like from the time you get up at, I'd say, because formations at 6 a.m., we would have to get up at like 4:30 in the morning. So you could show up, get ready, you could show up early to formation. You have to be on time. If you're not on time, you're going to get yelled at. You're going to get, have to do push-ups. There's going to be some kind of repercussion behind that. Your day starts bright and early. You're up before everybody else. Then you do PT. You have until 9 o'clock after PT. So roughly you get done with PT about 7:30, 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock, you have to be back for morning formation. So that way you can get ready to do your daily duties, whatever that may be, whether we're going to go to the field or do some training exercises. This is active duty military, of course, that I'm speaking about. This is not National Guard or reserves.
Hold on a second. So
Okay.
Why do you need to wake up at 4:30 if formation starts at 6?
Because you have to be there. Like they say that you have to be 15 minutes prior to formation, but a lot of platoons and other companies will require you to show up at least an hour before that.
Oh, interesting. And
Yeah.
what
And
is
if you live
formation?
off, formation is a muster. You get together everybody that's within the company so that we can do accountability. So like from the previous day to the next morning, they have to account for all the soldiers and make sure
Okay.
that they're showing up. Because if somebody doesn't show up, then technically, if they aren't accounted for, they're AWOL. Unless
Okay.
something bad happened, then
Right.
we have to find out where said person is.
Okay, so like you wake up at 4:30 and you got to be at formation by 5.
Correct. Yep.
And then so that's kind of like taking attendance.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And how long does that process take?
It takes roughly about 15 to 20 minutes. Then the first sergeant and the CEO talk. Normally afterwards, after they get done giving like their morning speech, exactly what's happening for that day, we would do our PT run, or depending on what day it is, we would do like physical training, like either go to the gym or go over to the pull-up bars, and do a lot of stuff just right there on the grounds. But normally it's 3 days a week that we do runs, and you run at least 10 miles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was stationed at Fort Bragg before it changed to Fort Liberty, and it was all gun-ho, and our days were 16-hour days.
Okay, so you wake up at 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
You're on some parade ground or something by 5, or I don't know where you are, right? And
Yes.
so is that correct? Is this parade ground? Is that
It is actually right in front of the company is
Okay.
where they have these musters. So yeah, go
yeah?
ahead.
So you're mustering up. That takes 15 to 20 minutes, but you're getting there. And in my experience, so I've worked some with veterans, and there's a lot of waiting, right?
A lot. Hurry up and wait.
So
Yep.
so it's like you got to be there by 5, but then formation starts at 6. Like they don't start early, right?
No,
And so what do you do between 5 and 6?
you sit and wait.
You sit and wait, right? So
you sit and wait.
You get your
Yep.
ass up at 4:30. You get
Yes.
dressed, and then you wait for an hour so that you can be on time. And then you're there
Right.
for 15 minutes, and then you go for a 10-mile run.
Yep.
And then what happens?
And then you come back to formation. They release you to go take showers, go home, get cleaned up, and then you have to be back by 9 o'clock. But
Where's
of course, you got to
breakfast?
be. Breakfast is in between that time, so you
Okay.
have time to clean up and eat breakfast. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that.
So how's the food?
So food on base, the chow hall we had there it was all right. It wasn't too great. They had like similar to buffet style, but it was mostly just, eggs, bacon, sausage. They had some pancakes, and that was generally it. Every now and then they have like biscuits and gravy, or you can make like an omelet or a breakfast burrito, but nothing crazy like that. Other than that, it was on you if you lived off post or you wanted to go get your own breakfast, it would come out of pocket. But a lot of single soldiers, they would get a meal voucher card. And whenever they go to the chow hall, they would have to show that meal voucher card to the chow hall so they can get a free breakfast, because that's part of if you're a single soldier.
Okay, interesting. So then you have breakfast. Formation ends at 9. Is that right? Or
It is.
What happens at 9?
The next muster is at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So that's for the duties for the day. You would meet up at 9 o'clock, fully dressed in ACUs, boots on, ready to go.
And then what do duties mean?
So the duties for the day would particularly entail things like training, field exercises. That's really about it. Unless we're doing like company area cleanup. That was another task that would get sent down to us that we would do. We would just go around, rake up leaves, pick up trash, things of that sort the entire day. And then normally on Mondays was motor pool days, where we go, since I was in an engineer unit, we would go down to our motor pool and we would service our vehicles. We would go down and do PMCS checks on them, preventive maintenance checks and services.
A lot of acronyms.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
I'm loving, Seth, the color you're adding, because I think military life is just, this is things I learned. It's just like so foreign.
It is. It's like one of those things that it exists, but like a lot of people aren't familiar with exactly what it entails.
So a muster is at 9 o'clock, and then you get assigned your daily duties. So how many hours is that in a day? Like how many hours are you running like exercises or like working in the motor pool?
Oh, like I previously said, it's 16-hour days. So like in total, like if we're at the motor pool and we're there for at least 2 to 3 hours, once we get done with PMCS checks and all that, then we would go on to the next task for the day.
Okay. You have time in there for lunch?
Yes, it's very brief. Sometimes we don't actually get a lunch. We actually eat while we're doing whatever that task may be doing. So like if you don't have a break for lunch, they'll give you MREs. You just sit there and eat MRE in the motor pool, or you eat it out in the field or whatever we're doing.
How are the MREs?
I think everybody can relate, because you've at least tried an MRE in your lifetime. If you have not, please do. It is an experience. You will love it.
What do you think about them?
So I mean, they're packed full of calories. They're definitely enough to get you by. Flavor wise, nah, I've had better.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I've had MREs and I completely agree. Like if you guys do something in this, take some takeaway, I'm sure there's a more profound, better takeaway for your mental health, but strongly recommend y'all try an MRE. My experience was that they're way better than what I expected.
Yeah.
Like I expected, like they're actually like, I mean, they're pretty like decent. Like I still remember. I maybe I had a good one. I don't know.
Maybe there's a select few that are good, and then there's like the egg omelets, and then the disgusting. And then there's a couple others that aren't too great, but the chili mac is really good. There's a couple other ones that are pretty decent in there. The cheese and the bread is great. Love it.
So I remember getting like peanut butter crackers, like a granola cookie with chocolate, like a main dish that was pretty, variable.
Yeah.
Like some of them are pretty good. Some of them are kind of like not the best.
They have a meatloaf too that is pretty decent.
Yeah, but sometimes. I mean, I was like, this is not, it's not like prison food by any means.
Nah. Yeah.
Okay, so MRE for lunch, and then so you say 16-hour days. We started at 4:30, like. Muster is at 9, then you're like working for like 8 hours or more.
So generally depends on what the tasks are for the day, because this isn't like everyday repeated 16-hour day thing. Like it can vary depending, but it generally like it was 16 hours. So by lunchtime, we had lunch. We're either still at the motor pool or we're out on like a field exercise. It's just running the same field exercise over and over again until the first sergeant and the CEO get done with whatever they're doing, whether that be meetings or they're out in the field actually just, I don't know what they're doing, because I don't know what they do. To be honest, I just do as I'm told. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. So that would usually last. If it's a field exercise, I was an engineer. I was out there operating heavy equipment. We would cycle out people in between, basically dig holes. We were a part of a light airfield repair operation is what we were.
Did you
as an
say
engineer unit.
dig holes?
Nah.
Dig holes.
Dig holes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I was
Correct.
like, what?
I was like,
Is that another acronym? Like what?
Like, I don't think I said that,
in
but all right.
my mind, my interpretation, it's polluted up there.
But yeah, that's what we did because we were engineering.
Yeah.
I was a heavy equipment operator. I was airborne, so I was located there. So we were a part of a LARP package, which is light airfield repair package. Is what it was. So when we did field
LARP
exercises,
package?
yes, correct.
Not live action role playing.
I wish. I mean, it kind of felt
damn,
like
dude.
it, but
Did I hear that one right?
yeah.
So like,
I never thought of it
your
that way.
job, you're a real life LARPer. Like that was your job.
Yeah.
If you guys
That was
love
my
LARP,
job.
join the military.
Right. Get to play it all out.
Yeah, it kind of is weird, right? It's sort of like acting a whole different life and becoming a different person for a little while.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely.
So then what time, like what does the late afternoon, early evening look like?
So we're looking at the wind down right before, like if we're going to be out that late, sometimes they provide MREs again for chow for, dinner. But lots of times we ended up getting out of there about 6:30 in the afternoon is about the rough estimate. And that would just end up with, if we went out and did an exercise for that day, it would be loading up all the equipment around 4:00, getting it all in trailers, and then we'd haul it back to the motor pool, unload it, and then we'd sit in the motor pool for like an hour waiting for the CO and the first sergeant to say we're good to go. We go up to the company, get released from there from another, formation or muster.
Yeah.
And then we finally get to go home, and we got to repeat the whole process again the next day.
Yeah. So where does the gaming come in?
So the gaming comes in lots of times between those hours of where you just don't sleep. You just stay up until like 10 o'clock at night, hanging out for like 3.5 hours or so, just playing games. So that or on the weekends. If you weren't on a field exercise for like a week long, because normally they would do field exercises where we would sell like multiple companies out there within the battalion, and we'd all be out there for like a week. But if you have your weekends off and you're not doing that, that's when you'd have that free time to be able to sit down and do some gaming.
And if you're not gaming during that time, like what else do people do? Because you're stationed on a base, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So normally when people do, if they, weren't gaming, there's lots of things off base to do. Like Fayetteville's right outside of Fort Bragg, where I was stationed at. There's a couple other bases. Like if you're stationed down there at Fort Benning has Columbus right there. Columbus is the greatest area ever, but it's still, things to do. Go out to the mall, hang out, eat. I mean, the active duty military is really not that much different, other than like just you're trained in that mindset. Like if you aren't overseas, you aren't in training, then you're just trying to live a normal life, but you still have your daily duties.
Yeah. So you mentioned mental structuring. Can you tell us about that? What's that like?
Absolutely. So in basic training throughout that and AIT, you're reshaping your mindset to deal with stressful situations. So you have drill sergeants yelling at you. You got drill sergeants waking you up in odd hours of the night just to prepare you for like the worst case scenario. You may not think of that at the same time because it's very, very like shocking to you to wake up in the middle of the night, somebody yelling right in your face. And like, it just breaks your whole, like, what's normal, to you. It's so that way you can be in a sharper mindset to be aware and ready in case like there's a scenario where you need to like jump up and be ready to go. Always be at the ready.
So what was your experience of that like? Like, how did you, like, who were you before you joined the military, and then what did you become after you joined?
Absolutely. So me before the military, I was just an average emo kid. I had long hair. I have long hair again. But I had a lot of friends hung out. We would like go see music, like bands all the time.
What kind of bands?
Metal bands, obviously. That's the kind of the niche that kind of attracted
emo
me
music
growing up.
and metal music isn't necessarily the same, so
No. Yeah. Oh yeah. True. Absolutely.
So emo kid.
Yeah. So I didn't exactly fit that niche when it came into like to the military. I was just a really laid back person, calm, really good to get along with. I had a lot of friends, and it just hung out all the time. I mean, I worked at Walmart and worked at Taco Bell, and like just the usual. Didn't have like a career per se I was trying to pursue because I was just like 18 years old at the time.
And
Like,
how did you decide to join?
I joined for all the wrong reasons, man. This is what I've been waiting for this. All right. I had a relationship at the time that was going south, or like real south. Like it was really just emotionally breaking. So, have been with this person for a very long time. I want to say like 4 years.
Oh my god! So like
yeah.
throughout high school, then.
Yeah. We were high school
Wow.
sweethearts for a while, and yeah, things were not going well with that. And so I wanted to escape. I picked the military. I had a friend that was joining as well. So we both joined. And he wanted me to go infantry. And I was like, I want to operate equipment. So I went ahead and signed up to be an engineer, and he signed up to be 11 Bravo, which is infantry.
So what is the time period between, like, how long did it take for you to decide that you wanted to join the military and you signed up?
I'd say after talking to my friend, because he initially showed his interest because he came from a military family. I come from a military family as well. My dad was not a veteran, but my grandpa was.
Okay.
But he, after his initial interest, and he shared it with me, I'd say about 2 to 3 weeks, it was like an impulsive decision. Like, this is my way out. Like, I just feel like absolute garbage right now because of the state I'm in with this relationship, and mentally I cannot take it. Like, I felt like I was going to vomit up blood kind of thing.
Oh my god.
So
dude. That's
yeah,
terrible.
yeah. Well, 4 years is a long time to spend with somebody and then just be, but I'm sure other people have happy stories like, oh, I'm so proud to serve my country and stuff like that. But this is just my mental state going into it and what led me to join the military.
And I mean, did you regret that at some point?
No, not at all. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for it.
Wow.
To be honest.
Tell me about what changed for you? Like you said, mental restructuring, right? So like, okay, the emo kid, super friendly, easy to get along with. Sounds like you have a lot of friends. Sounds like you've got healthy relationships. Sounds like you like music. Were you a gamer at that point?
Yes, absolutely.
What did you play in high school?
Halo. Grew up with Halo.
The original
That
Halo.
was the original Halo.
So
Go to
console
LAN
FPS.
parties.
Let's go,
Yep.
baby.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Anything else?
Or
Or mostly Halo?
mostly Halo. I mean, I watched my brothers when I was growing up play like GoldenEye, Final Fantasy, a lot of Super Nintendo games and things of that sort. But this is what it developed into. It was like the competitive SPS. Like I was very big into MLG in the high school, and I kept track of like the professional scene. Like wanted to actually do that for like a living.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Like I took it that seriously.
So from gaming FPS to IRL FPS.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then you decided to join the military, and what was that mental restructuring like for you?
It was quite shocking, honestly. So the first day that I got to, I went to MEPS, and then they sent me to
What is MEPS?
reception. MEPS for me was located in Indianapolis, Indiana.
What is it?
Oh, what is it? MEPS is I forget what the acronym exactly is, but it's where after you see a recruiter, you go there to finish your in processing for the military. So they do all the like
it's like your intake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you do MEPS somewhere, and then what happens?
So after you complete your MEPS process and you've been approved to join the military, you would wait roughly, depends on how fast you ship, because they have a ship process is what they call it. You can do a quick ship, which is 2 weeks, or you can set your ship date further out, a couple of months out. You don't have to like join immediately.
Okay.
I did a quick ship. So as
You
soon
wanted
as
the
I
GTFO.
like got everything, I wanted to get out of there now. Yeah, kind of thing.
And what were you thinking would happen once you joined the military? Like, what did you have? Was it about running away from something, or did you kind of envision, okay, once I go there, I'll get stronger, or
I envisioned like that a better like life, should I say? I mean, like I was already in like the downs over that, and like I lost my job because of it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, And so moving forward and like trying to do something better for myself seemed like the best
Like put your
scenario
life
there.
together.
Yeah, I try to pull my life together in like the military, because I forgot to mention that like I dropped out of high school actually at the age of 17. My mom ended up having to sign me out because I didn't want to do it anymore. Like I was a senior, I had like 29 credits, and you need 40 to graduate. So that meant like another year and a half of schooling or catching up summer school.
It sounds like you were just in a really bad mental headspace and just couldn't even. And did your family or anyone kind of think about getting treatment or anything like that at that point? Did that even was that on your radar at all?
I don't think like a lot of people identified mental health treatment or any mental health issues at that point in time, like as that, like they just weren't looking towards that. And if they did, there was like DMR programs, if you're familiar with stuff like that, similar to that, like they would just think you were crazy kind of thing. Yeah. Nobody identifies mental health issues like they do today. Like nobody, it's like, hey, there's different ways to approach this.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, we're probably in the same general ballpark in terms of age. And I remember my kind of high school experience, and like the concept of seeing a therapist during a toxic relationship or a breakup was completely foreign.
Oh,
so you join the military, and then what does the mental restructuring look like for you?
For me,
or
I was already,
I mean, whatever you, because can I pause for a second? Sorry to interrupt you when you're about to. So I think a big part of what we try to do on this channel is mentally restructure. So out of a lot of the stuff that you've said, that's the part that I'm almost like the most fascinated in. Mm-hmm. And I've seen so many of my patients who go through something, like they go in one way and they come out the other way. And so I think I'm so curious about, what's happening neuroscientifically, psychologically, what's the experience like, what's the subjective experience like, how does it shape you? So that's kind of why I'm interested in it. And I hope there's something we can learn.
No, yeah, absolutely. So the way a mental restructuring process looks military wise is that you're removing the sensitivity of scenarios. Like if somebody's yelling at you, normally you would be like, upset or like be scared. It's desensitizing that emotion is the way they do the mental restructuring. So like throughout training, like you got to learn to be, on the go, ready. They desensitize you to the idea of like feeling bad or upset. Like, yeah, you're going to feel upset and get mad inside, but there's not much you can do about it. It becomes such a casual, like regular thing that you just adapt to it. Like your mind just like goes numb.
So it's almost like training you in numbness.
In a way, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so what are some of the ways that they do that?
So I think that it was with the practices of waking up early, surprise like formations, the constant yelling, the reprimands from like, making mistakes or like, it's very attention to detail kind of stuff that happens throughout basics. So that way, a lot of things that can be life or death later on, like you're able to identify. So like they just instill that in you, like that you have to like pay attention to everything. Like you got to listen to what you're told. If not, you're going to get yelled at kind of thing. So that, like, it just desensitizes the whole, like this is setting up for later on as I build on this. But like, as you go through training and your mindset gets shifted towards this desensitized numbness, on deployments, it becomes more of a familiar, like, hey, I realize that this, like you go into join the military realizing that at some point in time you're going to be deployed, right?
Right.
Okay. So on deployments, like you go into it with the fear of like, yeah, there's a possibility that I could die, but it becomes such a regular, reoccurring, everyday thought that you're just comfortable with death at that point.
So I'm hearing you kind of say that what seems like a very scary reality is something that you become very comfortable with, and that you've been trained to be comfortable with that. So
absolutely.
and I know this is going to sound kind of weird. I'm going to use a word that I think has a negative connotation. So I'm almost getting a dehumanization. And I don't necessarily even mean that in a negative way, because I'm sort of noticing that they're removing, or you're learning to suppress individuality, even to a certain degree, the survival instinct, right?
Yeah.
What I think doesn't matter. What I want doesn't matter. How I feel doesn't matter. It's all about doing the thing.
Yeah.
Which actually sounds in some ways very, very, powerful, right? So it's like, if we think about what holds us back as human beings, I would say, generally speaking, we're the worst enemy we have in our life, right?
Sure.
It's my laziness. It's my anxiety that I can't control. It's that my anxiety controls me. And what I'm hearing from you is that this mental restructuring is like, they don't care about how you feel. In fact, the whole curriculum is designed to induce numbness, to be able to make sure that actions get taken, irrespective of who you are, who your dad is, who your mom is, what your religion is, how you feel that day.
Yeah.
And yeah.
To build off of what you said, I mean, like, you can look at the stereotypes that we see whenever, like, there's an examples in the military, like where drill sergeants or like people in leadership are yelling at you saying, "What do you want to go home to your mommy?" kind of scenario. That just it increases what you're saying, like, by volumes. You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing you kind of say that, like, I can describe it here in a conversation, but that is nowhere near what the actual experience is like.
Exactly.
And so in that moment, like, and if you feel comfortable sharing it, totally fine. I'm curious if there are particular, like, moments where you can share with us, like, what that was like for you when it really came to life.
Yeah. So the way I'm not saying it's all bad like that. I'm gonna get back to where you just said, but I'm not gonna say it's all bad like that. It was that you get that instilled in you from get go, like day one from training. But like, even in garrison where I was stationed, there was a good group of dudes there. Like, there was some leadership that didn't just like hound on you like that. Like, yeah, they had to play by the rules, and everybody, like, it's passed down through generations of leadership. Like, my sergeant taught me this way, and this is the way I treat my soldiers. And a lot of other people are like, I'm gonna treat my soldiers the right way, and make sure that, like, they're taken care of. But building off of, like, exactly what you said, I'll explain that to you, is in some scenarios, like overseas specifically, like, I've lost a lot of good friends that I made, and like, that desensitization, it's such a hard disconnect, because like, I have buddies that, like, I've seen every day, and then it's just an empty void, and like, that's one of the things that's hardest to cope with, but you just keep on driving through, because like, it becomes, like I said, like, you've identified death as such a friendly, like, term in your mind every day over there, that like, you just don't feel anymore.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull things in a little bit of an academic direction, because I'm not sure we want to keep going in the direction you just alluded to, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting, because when I hear you talk about it, I think it's really interesting, because the mental restructuring is about getting rid of positivity. And I didn't realize this until you just said it, but like, when I've worked with veterans, it's like, what they don't train you at so, it's like getting rid of anger, getting rid of curiosity, getting rid of free will, getting rid of even to a certain degree, like, sadness that keeps you from acting, right? So like, inertia. But what I'm really hearing is that, and it's things just clicked for me. Like, I'd never even noticed this or understood this, and I wonder if I've been doing my patients a disservice. But what they'd never train you to get rid of is voids. Yeah. Right? So to get rid of a positive thing, to numb yourself to a positive, to numb yourself to a very active emotion. I don't mean positive in terms of joy. I mean, like, the presence of an emotion like anger. That they can stress you out. Your cortisol level is going through the roof. You're suppressing your amygdala. But getting rid of the void is not something that they trained you with.
No, there's no coping mechanism to even deal with that they try to instill in you. Like from the get-go, you're just an asset, a tool.
And so what is that like?
Man, what can you do? That's all I think is like the exact same scenario. It's like I got 4 years that I signed up for. That's all I need to complete. If life gets better, I may consider re-enlisting. If life doesn't, then, you know, I'll plan on moving on, you know. I'll get out. I still have 4 more years of being in reserve. After that, I'm done. Like, because, like, I'd say that my experience at Fort Bragg compared to other military installations was far more severe than anywhere else. And that's just because of the leadership at that time. And I've heard it from many people who are still in. Your leadership was just not good at that point in time.
So I find myself being incredibly curious about that statement, and at the same time don't know if that's something that is worthwhile to go into. So I'll kind of like leave that fork in the road for you. Like, I would love to hear personally, like, because when you say something like that, it's like, what are you talking, you know, or because and I think it would really add a lot of color. And I think this is what's so confusing for a lot of people who have an understanding or relationship with the military, is that it's not all the same.
No,
right. So I would say the really interesting thing is, even when I work with veterans who have PTSD or substance use issues, I'm amazed by how much it messed them up and how much they love it. And I don't think it's just like a trauma or abusive kind of like Stockholm syndrome. I think it's like, it really does change you in a lot of ways that are positive. And the most common answer that I hear is yours, is that I don't regret any of it. But it also sounds like it was incredibly difficult for you. So, I mean, thinking about like, so I feel like there's something really important there. Like, how can you have such a really, what sounds like negative experience happen to you in life and come out of it looking back at it the way that you do now? Like, that sounds insane, dude. Like, in a good way,
Yeah.
like incredible resilience.
Absolutely. So with that, the biggest thing is that why people, I think personally, and from my own perspective, and a lot of that I've heard from veterans, is that it's more or less complacency is what it is, because you become so familiarized with like a regular schedule. This is what I wake up, this is what I do. There's a good group of dudes that I'm hanging out with, brothers and sisters that are around me. Leadership, maybe not so much. I mean, to where I was, no. Other places, I'm sure they had good leadership, and they build that camaraderie, they build that community, and like when they leave, they miss it.
So, a couple of questions. Do you feel comfortable giving us some color to how your experience was different?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So one of the key like notes when it comes to how my experience was different is that if you were to look at like where I was stationed in the 16-hour work days and all the tasks and duties and constant like go, because it is an airborne base. If you were to look at like a military installation that's not airborne, they don't do half the stuff we do. So their hours the day are like 8-9 hour days, and their leadership is a lot more laid back because there's a lot less detail that gets pushed down to them. Airborne bases are just gun ho, like we got to get stuff done, you know, like we got the 82nd, there at Fort Bragg. I'm not saying that that's all that is specifically different about my experience. I would say that it's partially just because of the old generational military values that were instilled in some of the leadership that haven't quite evolved to what it is today. Like similar to where we discussed with the mental health, identifying and addressing those issues with the relationships like we previously stated.
Yeah. So, and once again, like we can go to, I'm curious about complacency too. So like I can ask
Mhm.
you a question about that, but like what is the change in military values? What are the ways that things used to be and how are they evolving today?
I feel like from what I've identified is that we've grown past the mindset of where your feelings don't matter, the mission matters the most, and pushing people until they break. And we're starting to identify now that people are breaking far too soon at an earlier age in the military, and that's why we're seeing a lot of people get boarded out, and that there's a lot of issues that we're starting to develop into like a more aware
So
military
I
unit.
would love to hear about that. And it doesn't have to be like personal, but like
Yeah.
what's going on? Why are people breaking earlier?
uh I mean, you come in with your expectations of like, I'm going to be a soldier, I'm going to be like an American hero kind of thing. And then you get like a lot of people just aren't prepared mentally to deal with everything you have to do throughout basic training. And then as soon as you get to your first unit, like your experience can go really well for you, or for some, it can go really bad. And in some cases where people do break mentally, I've seen people just break down and cry and turn into a ball in basic training. And it's like you just sit there and wonder, like, I don't know what your past is or where you came from, but you obviously, like, I don't know how you can prepare for this or what you thought it would be, kind of thing. I can't speak for them personally.
Yeah, of course.
That's just what I've seen.
And then with some of the work that y'all do with veterans, like, so I'm assuming that there may be an overlap between the work that y'all do and people getting med boarded out. What are y'all seeing? What's happening to veterans?
So a lot of the people that we talk to that are getting boarded out, it's not particularly for mental health issues. That is some cases that I have heard of, that I've spoken to people, but most of the med boarding situations are due to because of the injuries, or like they joined the military, and back then they were recruiting anybody and everybody. So once they're in the military, they got through their basic training, their AIT, and got stationed somewhere. They found out there's something wrong with them. Like they have like scoliosis so bad at the back. They had like shin splints or something like that. They have flat feet, things of that sort. And those are the type of things that start to develop after like AIT and basic training. They develop into an actual serious mental or like medical situation where like they would have to have surgery. Once they've had the surgery, the military judges like their stance, like whether they're still like a value or asset to the military, and if there's like any chance that they have to repeat surgeries to fix said such like medical health, they would just go ahead and abort them out.
Okay.
But during that whole process, they like, of course you're not get treated the best because you aren't doing anything for your leadership, so they're yelling at you, why are you going to these appointments, like you're never like on formations, you're not on these layouts. They're just yelling at you and stuff. And you're like, there's nothing I can really do about this. It's just the way I am kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know?
It sounds like there's a lot of blame for things that are out of your control.
There is. Yeah.
That sounds really brutal.
But you still have to take accountability because you're still that person there. So
yeah, so I'm kind of getting that, right? There's a very uncompromising responsibility. It's like, and I can sort of see that, right? So like the attitude of, if you're in a combat situation, like, that's the reality, that no one is going to care in that moment about your feelings, but it sounds really challenging. What I'm kind of curious about, Seth, is, so it seems like there's an older leadership style, but I'm also hearing you say that people are having more problems now. So it sounds to me like, if I think about it for a second, I would think that the older leadership style would lead to more problems. And if we're more sensitive to these issues now, then we should have less problems.
Exactly.
So
I believe in
what's
that,
the deal there? Like,
it's just a huge disconnect is all it is. Like it's very obvious. We're just looking at it. Like it go ahead.
No, what's the disconnect?
The disconnect is between the generations because people aren't like built like that anymore, should I say?
Okay.
Like mentally, that's the disconnect. So like if you have somebody that's been instilled with them like for their entire lives, like an older gentleman that's like in their like 40s or 50s that's still in the military, And like, this is the way they're raised. They look down on soldiers like, hey, you aren't, you just aren't tough like me, kind of thing. Like, suck it up. That just goes back into like that huge disconnect, because like they aren't able to address that. Like, this is getting worse and worse. Like, it's not that people are getting more sensitive. It's just that we never addressed it before. And then who's to say that that military person, like that guy that's been in for like, guy or gal, sorry, or however you identify, where when they get out, the transition between active duty to civilian life is going to be that much rougher for them.
So tell me about that. What makes transition? So this is what I've seen too, is that like transition seems really hard. So it's almost like, you're one person, but oftentimes people join pretty young. So you're not like fully formed yet. And then you get crafted, you adapt to become numb, obedient. I've heard tons of hilarious stories about, I wouldn't quite call it passive aggressive, but more like malicious compliance, where it's like, the military operates in almost like a comical way with how rigid it is. And like people are, like I can't think of any stories, but I've had patients tell me stories. I don't know if anything comes to mind for you, but, and then so you learn to survive there, and it's like a different world.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the real world, or not the real world. That's the wrong, you come back to the civilian world. And then like all of these adaptations that you've had, like numbness, I think is a huge one, right? So like emptiness, like people just carry around a lot that is very foreign, and it's really hard for them to reintegrate.
Absolutely. So, but speaking from my perspective, when I transitioned out of the military, the process was not too pleasurable at all. Like so you're 6 months out from ETSing, which is the end time service, where you transition out of the military. You're supposed to start going to see all your doctors, getting everything done before you're supposed to get out, like your dental and everything like that. Go ahead and start the process where you have like this sheet of list of things to complete. You have to turn in uniforms, equipment, things of that sort. During this time, you're supposed to be excluded from like any kind of details, like layouts, things of that sort. You're, depending on where you are, and this is just from my experience, they don't honor that at all. Your leadership does not. Like, you're supposed to be excluded from that. You're supposed to be able to complete this process. There's a ton of forms you got to complete. And it takes that long because you have to schedule months out, because there's other people doing the same thing at the same time. So that was a part of like the worst part of it, because like you become so complacent. This is everyday life. And then you're like, hey, I'm ready to go out. And then you got to deal with the stress of like scheduling these appointments and then telling your leadership, hey, I got to be here at this time. And they're like, no, you're going to be on this layout. And you're like, but I'm getting out of the military. Why are you trying to make me do more stuff? So that was a big issue that I dealt with.
So how do you resolve that? I mean, when your CO tells you need to be at this layout, and then you've scheduled an appointment like 3 months in advance because, things take a long time to schedule and are super slow. Like, literally, what do you do? So in a couple of instances, I've went to the layout, completed it, and then I was like, hey, I'm leaving. I got an appointment to go to. Like, and I just left. And there's nothing they can do about it, because there's a piece of paper that they give you that's it says that you're excluded from that stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of like a morals thing there, because like you're supposed to like be at this appointment and it's important to you. This is the whole process. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This piece of paper says you're supposed to be doing that. But then you're also being told by your leadership, which you aren't allowed to disobey, because you see them jade for, disobeying somebody. What is ECMJ?
Uniform military. I have to remember this acronym.
Okay. Sounds like a disciplinary action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Got
is what it is. Yep.
So it sounds like, I mean, the way that you navigated it is doing everything you could to make your leadership happy.
Yep.
And also like using, and it's so interesting. This sounds so military where it's like, I have this excuse, which means technically I don't have to come to the layout, But if I do that, I'm going to get punished. So I need to do everything that I can. I need to demonstrate to you that I'm doing everything that I can to be obedient. And if I give you like 80% of what you're asking for, and I have a piece of paper that lets me like step away from the last 20%, that's kind of where it sounds so military.
Yeah.
Where it's like stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you like sort of like figure out, you try not to piss anyone off, you try to maximize obedience, but also you're being told two different things by two different people, and you're trying to adhere to them both.
Yeah.
It reminds me, when I was finishing residency training, you know, I had set up what I thought was a really cool job. So it had like 3 components to it. So I was going to do like one piece of work over here, and a second piece of work over here, and a third piece of work over here. And thankfully, I got some very good advice from one of my mentors who was like, this is terrible. But I was like, how is it terrible? It's all the things it's some stuff on meditation, some stuff on addictions, and then some stuff on like program development. And then he was like, you're going to have 3 masters, none of whom care about the other 2. So like they're all going to want you to do their thing, right? Because that's what you're there for. You're with this boss to do this job.
Yep.
And when that boss doesn't care, they've got their own metrics, they've got their own patients that they need to see. They need to make sure that the clinic is profitable and research gets published and all that kind of stuff. And it oftentimes is like one of these things where you're getting paid for 8 hours of work and you're doing 16 hours of work. And so that sounds brutal. And what do you mean by complacency, though?
So, I mean, with complacency, you become so used to like the casual life that like this is the regular now kind of thing. Like it's the repetitiveness of waking up in the morning, going to do PT, doing whatever task or detail for the day, and then like that just becomes normal life to you. As far as like you become complacent in like the mental aspect of it. Like anything else like deters or changes from that, you like it just feels uncomfortable. And it's like why a lot of people miss it, is because it was such an easy life to just do what it was told.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that you're kind of on autopilot, and you don't have to think or struggle with what do I do next? What do I do today? You know, do I work harder? Do I do one extra load of laundry? Do I, there's a lot of decision making that's removed.
Yes.
And what makes transitioning back to the civilian world so difficult?
It's such a shock, the culture, like it just being like that free will reintroduced into your life, and like you being like, well, I can set a schedule, but it's not being told to me. I'm just the one telling myself. But it's just been instilled to you so much, like this is the regular, the complacent, this like your mindset alone, like you just like have that disconnect. Like it's just a void once you leave as well. Like you don't have that connection to the same people that you used to. Like, yeah, you can call them and stuff like that, but it's not like an everyday repetitive, like friendly face. Like, and then like the connections you had with your friends before, like it's not the same. It is not. Like I've lost a lot of good friends. Not only them, but you. Like you just like internally, like you just your thought process, like the way you react emotionally, like in situations, just feelings in general. Like I said, you've been numbed the entire like time throughout your service just to be like this asset or tool for the military, and then you come into civilian life and like that's just so instilled in you that like you just don't associate like you would normally feel. And that's what a lot of people, I feel like a lot of veterans say, is they just want to feel normal.
And what do they feel? What do they feel like?
There's that lossless, like hopelessness kind of scenario where like they just feel like that's like why a lot of people turn very like hermit crabs. Like they become very socially isolated. They start like turning internally. They just sit there and like stay at home all day, play like some play video games, but they don't reach out to others. And then like they just don't have that social network that they need, like they did in the military, because they had like a group of like 10, guys that they've seen like every day, and like a whole company of like 50 plus people that like they associated with, like whatever they're doing, like tasks or duties. They don't have that anymore. They don't have that network.
So it sounds like you know your relationships were super important and authentic when you were like in active duty, and then what changed about those relationships when you left? You said they're not the same at all. So
I mean, everybody goes back home. Like they try to go back to like similar to what I did. Like everybody goes back home, tries to go back to regular life, tries to create a new way. And like you miss them. I still talk to some of my buddies, but like I went and seen them a couple times, but it's not quite the same. But the same emotional response and the way we feel, that's how we connect. Like just that, emptiness, like miss them.
So it sounds like you guys used to be full and now you connect over being empty.
Yeah.
Do y'all like
That's exactly.
What does that look like? How does one connect over being empty?
It's more about connecting over the feeling because somebody can actually like relate to it. That's the biggest like hurdle in that gap there. Because like if I was to talk to you about the way I feel, I'm sure you can explain why I feel that way and see like, the reasons why it happened to me. But to actually connect with somebody over that and build camaraderie and like try to lift another person up in like a down spot, like a lot of people can't connect on that level. That's why like I feel like having a peer or like another veteran is the greatest like approach to that.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like y'all become misfits to society, and so y'all are the group of kids who are, all hang out together.
That's a
You're
good
emo
label.
kids.
Yeah, we're emo kids again. We're all over again.
Right? Yeah, and I think it's incredibly powerful because I think I'd love to hear. So that makes more sense now, right? So if I have a group of people who has excavated and rooted out their free will, their ambition, even to a certain degree, social skills, right? Because y'all are a part of that socialization is not enforced, but it's like so easy and taken for granted, right? Because you're with these people, you're like, not another day. I hate motor pool, and everyone else is like, I hate motor pool too, right? Or like today, your CO is like, oh, thank God, like this CO is not on the base today. He's out of town. So like, oh, this is such a relief. There's a lot of shared experience that y'all can connect around, and then it sounds like you guys get fragmented, and the people around you don't. It seems like you're a different kind of human.
It does. Like you're just the odd man out in the crowd. Like honestly, like it does affect you to the extent where like your social skills just aren't the same anymore. Because like I have like severe anxiety in large crowds, and like just meeting new people and just striking up a conversation is really hard. Like I'm surprised like I'm already capable to like carry this conversation as well as I am right now.
Is this conversation hard for you?
I feel no, I don't think it is, but I also feel like
You're not.
I'm also just talking to avoid the silence too. So
okay. So what were you? Did you have difficulty in crowds when you were younger?
No,
Okay.
that wasn't really the scenario. Like I feel like that's part of what was instilled in me because I've always been taught in the military to be aware of my surroundings and keep a close eye on like details.
So
and
hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance seems to be like a huge play for me, and like I just get overwhelmed because like I just get triggered in like large groups.
Yeah, it's interesting and really like Seth. I wish I could have listened to this conversation when I was training to be a psychiatrist. Because I think we had I'm realizing now that, and I sort of figured this out through clinical work, but like this is not what we were taught, right? What we were taught is that when you work with a veteran, you're dealing with PTSD. And PTSD has to do with one or more traumatic events, usually during service. And what I'm really appreciating from you is like the challenges. We're buying the challenges with the way that you get trained. The hypervigilance. Because I was thinking about, this whole thing of like waking you up at random times and yelling in your face.
And that's one of the biggest things that built off of it. I am going to touch base with PTSD a little bit. I identify as someone who's been diagnosed with PTSD. I have experienced traumatic events. And that is another thing that I cope with every day. But like, I think the biggest aspect of what affects veterans is the fact that like they've been mentally reshaped, and then they have to deal with those traumatic events on top of that. And that's why PTSD is so severe. So whenever people go get like diagnosed for PTSD, the anxiety overrules the PTSD in most situations, and that's what they end up getting diagnosed with. Unless you have such a severe, event that happened that it, deserves the title of PTSD at that point. Like I said, I've lost a lot of friends, and like I do live with survivor's guilt. So
That sounds challenging, man. I mean, a stupid thing to say, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's so. In a weird way, I feel actually some degree of like hope, because I think that part of what's going on is I do and maybe, I mean, I'm pretty sure. How can I say this? I'm pretty sure that the academic establishment is missing a pretty big piece of this. And I know it's weird to say, like, I trained at arguably one of the best institutions in the world, and I had amazing teachers. Did some awesome veterans work. Like, I mean, I'm talking just really transformative, really solid. Like, I ran a group for several months and had, help working with veterans who struggled with addiction issues, and just really powerful, like, group work.
awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. I was actually going to say that like I also volunteer at a harm reduction coalition here locally. So
Yeah.
big advocate for people that are in recovery, or even not in recovery, whatever your path to recovery looks like. I'm here for it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think my experience with that stuff was, first of all, like how eye-opening it was that. So first of all, I fell in love with group work by working with veterans. I love group work. It's actually my favorite kind of work to do. I like it more than doing individual work. It's just so powerful and transformative. And what I really saw there is that all the things that I was taught heal people is not what I was seeing heal people. And it was like really weird. Like it was like, so I remember this one conversation that was, so there was a veteran who then entered the police force. And then it was really interesting because the veteran had been driving drunk and then gets home, wife gets pissed, and she's like, I'm going to divorce you. Right? Because this is a huge problem, and like you've got a drinking problem, all this kind of thing. And the really thing that blew my mind was that everyone in the room could relate to that, right? And so what they did is they were on team drunk driving. They actually weren't on the wife's team. They were like, this is crazy. Like, because we deal with this shit, right? To be honest. Like, this is what it struggled. And so, and then one person was like, hold on a second. Because there was a lot of reflexive, this is your unit. Like, this is your team. Whether they screw up or whether they do good things or bad things or whatever, it's like, this is my team and I'm going to support them no matter what. And then one person was like, well, hold on a second. What are we talking about here? This person is driving drunk. Like, we're in an alcohol addiction recovery group, and this is a problem. And like the whole room went through this like period of catharsis where everyone was like, because we trust this guy. This is not the enemy. This is the guy. And if someone else, if an outsider criticizes us, if an outsider says, oh yeah, she's got a point, the defensive reaction is so powerful. And I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but like, it's wild, like what the healing really looks like. And it's not about cognitive schemas or like, it's about, we have all of this stuff. We have this programmed way of living, and someone from within the programming is saying, hold on a second. This may not be what we think it is. Let's question our reactions. It's like, I can't do that as a psychiatrist. I mean, we try, but the power is just completely different. Because it's my job to say that. It's different when it's one of your own is saying like, hey, bro, that's wrong. If I'm a addiction psychiatrist telling you that drunk driving is bad, like no one is going to bat an eye. It's not going to get anyone to think. Right? What they're going to say is, you don't understand what it's like to live a day in my shoes. And they'd be right.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the point of my story was, but
I get where you're trying to connect there. Like I do. So like, with that case scenario of the veteran drinking and his wife is more or less just a coping mechanism that he created, that it just became so complacent, like that if life was bad, he was drinking and he was driving at the same time. And a lot of people could relate to that same scenario. And that's why they were so defensive over it. Like, hey, there's nothing bad about that. I do it too, because it's what I do, like, to deal with my problems, kind of thing.
And what is it that they relate to? What is that experience? How is that? What do they understand about? So that civilians are like, oh my God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But like, what do veterans understand about that person that is like, makes sense to them?
Probably the stress, the everyday life. Like, you wake up, this is what is expected of you. You got to get up early. I'll give you a prime example for myself. Like, even after I got out, when I transitioned, like, I still woke up through periods in the middle of the night, even like thinking I was late for something, feeling like like something was wrong. Like the same kind of stress that I dealt with, like, it's probably was something that individual was dealing with. Like, it's just everyday life. Like, hey, I got to get up early. Like, so like, got to get this done, kind of thing. And like, it's just like one thing after another.
So, it sounds like there's almost like a irrational fear that causes stress, but you can't get, and this is, you can't get rid of it. No, because it's not rational.
No, it's not.
So I see you smiling. So I'm also, I'm leaning into my veteran work.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Oh, it's really kind of hard to define. Like, it's just one of those things that like you're numb to the idea of like emotions and feelings to the extent to where like you just can't really connect. But when it comes to like impulsive reactions, or like, like you said, it was a reaction to the stress, then like that's something that just comes instantaneous, like something you live with every day. Like, that's why a lot of people break down. That's what keeps you human too.
What do you mean by that?
When it keeps the stress, like, if you can still have a response to that and not go through life just unfazed, then like I feel like that just makes you more like feel more human, normal, should I say? Because if I was just like getting yelled at by you or something, or like I did something wrong, my reaction should be to be like upset. But if I was so numb to the like the feeling that I didn't show a response, then are you even human at that point?
Can I think for a second?
Yeah.
Maybe a long second.
Okay.
But I understand you're pretty good at waiting.
See what you did there?
Well, no, whether chat is as good as waiting, we'll see. Just give me a second, because I think something just clicked for me. I don't know what it is. Okay. I'm going to toss something out, okay?
Okay.
So, man, I wish I had listened to this one. I seriously, like, that's the strongest feeling I have right now is I wish I had known this 6 years ago when I saw my first veteran, probably. No, 10 years ago. So here's what I'm kind of piecing together. And I think this is huge. So you're trained to be numb, because being numb is what you have to do to survive. And especially you're trained with a certain kind of numbness, right? Toning down the dial on negative emotions that usually get you in trouble. Anger, defiance, free will, right? So then you get turned, like you said, like they dehumanize you. I mean, you said you get turned into an asset. And that's not, they're not trying to be cruel or anything. I think this is like what's really confusing for a lot of people. Everyone will listen to this and say like, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. And it is terrible in some ways. I think you're here because it's terrible. You're here to try to help make it less terrible.
Yes.
But that's also sometimes what's necessary. Because if you're in a combat situation, you don't have the luxury of like being groggy when you wake up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? You don't have the luxury of feeling angry when your CO tells you to do something that is like risky from like death. Now, the challenge is, so they craft you into something, and that asset, that tool works for the job that you have. But there's such a fundamental restructuring of how a human being experiences life that you go through. Then you transition back to the civilian world. And this world is completely different. You're not told what to do every day. Sometimes you try to cling on, and now I'm going to start inserting stuff based on my experience, but
Yeah.
Feel free to contradict it if it's wrong.
Oh, I could reinforce everything you say. I mean,
okay.
you got the idea. Run with it.
And then I think some people survive by instituting that structure, right? So they bring the military structure with them in life, where it's like, we're like a military household and military families, right? So we're going to teach our kids to be structured.
Gonna operate as a unit.
And then, but a lot of people just flounder with the lack of structure, the lack of direction, the lack of, for many years, your ambition has been quenched. Your goals have been quenched. It's just, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? What are we doing today? Your social skills have also atrophied because you don't have to ask someone if they want to hang out because you guys are getting assigned duty.
Exactly. And you don't get the opportunity to think. So when you have the opportunity to think about what you want to do or who you want to talk to that day, it just doesn't cross your mind.
Yeah, right? And so then you've become a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know how to exist in the civilian world. Y'all get fractured. You get split apart, you and your unit. You guys have been a unit, right? Like it's not, you guys aren't multiple units. You are a unit. You identify with these people. The organism of your humanity becomes connected. Y'all are almost like cells as part of a body, which is what the military is trying to train.
Yep.
And now you get fractured. And you can call each other, but that's not that, you didn't call each other when y'all were like, what? Right? You guys, you're like, oh shit, meatloaf again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So then you get fractured and you try to stay in touch, but then there's another whole problem. We haven't even talked about the trauma and fair, I don't think we need to. But then then you come back, it's hard to integrate into society. You feel kind of like compassless because you're not being told what to do. You don't know how to form connections with people. And there are a couple of other layers to that. One is that you have an emptiness within you. You have a void. They didn't teach you how to get rid of that because you didn't have it when you started. It's not a part of training. That happens when you come back home and some other people don't. They don't teach you how to fill things in. They just teach you how to get rid of things.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, well, the biggest thing in transition is that they don't offer assistance with any mental health at all, how to cope, how to transition that mindset and like bring it back down, like, because you're always like on that vigilant alert. This is a completely like, it's a familiar, but it's a new space now because your mind has been re-geared, restructured. And once you're reintroduced, like that same numb, non-emotional mindset that you had before leads to like harder situations and relationships. You just have that disconnect between you and another. You're not able to associate like love per se in some scenarios, or you become so isolated that you don't connect with anybody else.
Absolutely, man. And I think it's like there's like you were kind of saying about not being able to connect, right? So we have all these problematic marriages where you have, someone that you were engaged to, you get engaged before you go on deployment, and then you come back and but when you guys met and you started dating, you were a different person. And they were a different person too.
Yeah.
and you can't empathically connect because you've toned down a lot of those emotions. And I think the super scary thing is that you were kind of talking about this numbness and like not feeling human. So this is a really common experience where it's like when I work with veterans, they feel like they're stepping into an alien world, like the civilian. Like I'm not like these people. They can't relate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's one of the biggest things we hear too. Is a lot of people like they have friends and family, but they said like they're happy they found our community because they're able to find people that they can relate to get it.
And I think the most dangerous version, maybe not most dangerous, but one really, unfortunate manifestation of that is kind of this, when you feel like you're not human, when you feel super numb, sometimes the only way that your brain, your body, your mind knows how to feel alive is by creating chaos, is by engaging in impulsive situations, because now your survival instinct kicks in. Now you're feeling that you know how to deal with a crisis. If your wife is yelling at you because you've been driving drunk, that's actually familiar because, hey, your drill sergeant has been doing it. You know how to deal with people yelling at you. This is home field advantage. Like, this is what I know how to do. What they don't know how to do is when I come home and you're not yelling at me, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to eat. And it's kind of like you're like acting.
That's really what it feels like, to be honest with you. Because so the first 3 years after I got out of the service was probably the worst for me, to be honest. I had just had a kid. Prior to having the kid, I had just started dating this girl when I met her in the military. We had a kid. Yeah, I was married when I joined the military, so I did the whole spill, dude. Okay, so within my first year and a half of being in the military, I ended up getting married, meeting this girl, known her for like 6 months, got divorced from her, met another girl.
Classic.
Like 7 months later, she's pregnant. A whole military experience. Get out of the military. I'm still with her today, but we had a kid together. But after I get out of the military, we had a kid together and everything like that. It was those emotions, those feelings weren't there. Like it was just emptiness, dude. Like it was just like
and
hard to connect.
You gotta think you're so fucked up if that's
yeah. That's why I told whenever I finally went to the VA to talk to somebody about it and start actually doing transitioning there, so I can get into the VA system, the healthcare system. That was in 2015. That's 3 years after I got out of active duty. That's when I addressed it, and I told the doctor there, it's like, hey, like I love my children, but like I just don't feel like love, like it's like just doesn't nothing there kind of thing. And that's like first time that like I was addressed with like mental health. Like I was offered a chance to talk to somebody, which at the point in time I didn't, but it put me on the path to where I am today. So
can I ask you a personal question or two?
Yeah.
Do you feel love now?
I do. It's taken me a lot to get to where I am today. A lot. And a lot of just self-growth and understanding of who I am as a person now.
I would love to hear about that journey.
I'll save it for another time.
Okay. Fair enough. Right? Because I think this is where, I wasn't sure what involved that journey, if it was, but I think it's like, man, Seth, the number of people I've talked to, worked with, heard from, people walking up to me on the street who are like where you were in 2015. I don't know how to get those people to where you are now. I'll be honest. Like, I'm a good psychiatrist. I work really hard. I study really hard. I try to help people. I have not figured it out. I don't know. I've had some degree of difficulty in my life, but like there's no like because these people are searching for something, and the problem is there's no consistent answer. I don't know how to do it. Therapy is just a piece of it. It
is absolutely. I feel like going through. So I won't get fully into detail because I want to save that story for you for later. But I didn't fully address it until 2020. I initially went to the VA because me and my wife were on our second attempt at a divorce, and it was like a make or break kind of situation. And I identified the issue as me. I was really disconnected from the family. So I ended up going to talk to the VA, started talking to a psychiatrist there, got introduced to their program, started doing cognitive behavior therapy, which helped me out for approximately 6 weeks, at which point there was too much real confrontation with my PTSD and my anxiety. So I withdrew from that program. But it did help me identify a lot of the stuck points that I was dealing with. And
Yeah.
that was just an issue in our relationship.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so tell me about Warrior Gamers, because I think it's like, I think y'all, I mean, I haven't worked with any patients or, people that, but I mean, like, I gotta think the work that y'all do is fucking magnificent, man.
Man, I've heard.
If it's being done by people like you, I'm like sold, because I think there's
I've,
something that I can't give.
so it's a constant work, man. Like I put my passion, my heart into this, and
Yeah.
like there's other individuals that are in the same boat, and there's some people that are like they're still just not quite there. And like the biggest thing is like I like the work we do, it does make an impact. It does, and we've seen that. Like we've done an IRIB and everything with Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. We've seen the impact over a case study of 100 individuals from our Discord who took that survey, and like we see those numbers. It makes a difference. I have to pull the IRB number up for you, but it's hard work, man. Like not like it's making a difference and it's making an impact, but it's also taking a toll on us. So we have to like,
What's hard
take
about
care
it?
of ourselves. It's a lot of work to run a whole organization from a volunteer position. Like every day, like I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of what Josh has brought together here. I'm proud of like the fellow colleagues that I've had along the way. They aren't with us anymore. That made a detrimental impact on mental health for veterans. And a lot of the things that we're doing now with the VA and we're providing resources. There's different organizations that are coming out and providing resources to our veterans. It's just amazing. Like we have a testimonial section on our Discord where people, if they feel up to it, they want to provide a testimonial that are more than able to provide the impact on their personal lives that our organization has had on them.
What do y'all need?
We would love, okay, so the way that nonprofits work, of course, we don't make money. We have to, file for grants and look for sponsors and donations. And one of the biggest things for our initiatives, our events, and the way we operate is we need funding. Like we just need to push this impact. Like we need people out to hear about us, know what we do, and know the impact that we're having. And I think that's all we need, to be honest with you. Other than that, it's just, need to start having some funding come in so that way we can start really pushing for this. Because myself and everybody that's on staff currently, we're not paid. We're here for you, and I'll continue to do it. I don't care about the money. I care about my brothers and sisters who left and right of me. I know there's a lot of people out there with issues, and I'm right here with them.
Yeah, I think I know. So my understanding is we're gonna try to help you with some stuff. I don't know the details of that yet. I think this is my piece of what we're doing. But we were just on Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago, advocating for more funding for addiction programs and grants and things like that. So I think we're gonna do what we can. The really eye-opening thing for me is I have a new conception of how to approach helping veterans now that I've never had before, despite the fact, I had all the pieces. I think I think I understand enough, and I think I know enough of what you're saying just by working clinically, but it's so weird how I did not understand, despite having people come into my office over and over and over again, how I was not able to piece together these pieces of the puzzle until I heard you talk about it. And sort of the themes of what's going on, that almost the diagnosis almost sounds secondary to me. And this is what we learn with veterans work. So when you do veteran mental health, that's what you do. Like having a patient who is a veteran is different from doing veteran mental health. And I've never understood that until now, that the assumptions we make about the physiology, the neuroscience, and the psychology are based on civilians. All of our research about evidence-based interventions, cognitive behavioral therapy was developed in civilians, is studied in civilians. For PTSD, for anxiety, is studied in civilians. So now I'm beginning to understand what has changed. So there's a fundamental numbness. There's a fundamental skills atrophy. There's a fundamental lack of connection, right? And that lack of connection has a neuroscience component to it. It's because of continued intentional suppression of the amygdala and the limbic system. So for years of your life, you have tried to shut that down. Other people have tried to shut it down for you. And then there's a whole host of other things that are clinically making sense, like, and turning it back on means opening the door to anger, means opening the door to free will in an unhealthy way. And so many of the veterans that I've worked with, they tried opening that door and it did not work well for them. So now we're going to keep it shut on purpose. So even the solution becomes something to be feared.
That's great that you say that about the anger, because that's one of the issues that I dealt with from 2012 to 2015 is that door opening, and then it's just like anger for no reason, short-tempered, like,
oh yeah,
is just one of the hardest things to address.
And this is like, so the other thing that I kind of discovered, I mean, this is not a good thing, but just how hopeless things really are. I know it's going to sound kind of weird, but like when I work with patients, it's like these things happen to them and they have no control over it. So anxiety, panic attacks, arguably flashbacks and things like that. But really, it's like, I'm just trying to get back into living a normal life. I'm having pancakes on Sunday at IHOP. And suddenly, I just have this reaction and I don't know what's going on. I feel terrible. I have to get out of here. You leave cash on the counter and you run out of there. And then, like, what do you do to fix that? You can't fix it. Right? It comes out of nowhere. It's really random. It feels just really, really like, because there's not a problem. It's just like at random ass times, it's like your body just malfunctions. It's like some computer game glitch where like suddenly like there's a glitch and you fall through the ground and you're falling forever. And it's like, what do you do? There's nothing you can't do anything to fix it. It's really what it feels like.
That's exactly what it feels like. That's a great analogy there on that too. One of the one of the other things that are like I've experienced myself that I've noticed as a veteran is that like you're over vigilant in some scenarios, but in other scenarios, your mind starts to wander and you start to have like these daydream scenarios where like things play out in your mind. Like you start to have those revisit of like the visions, like the trauma.
Yeah. And then there's the PTSD. I'm not even talking about the PTSD, bro.
Not even touching it yet. Yeah.
Right. And so then there's all the manifestations, but that's kind of like what you've really opened my eyes to, is just how pervasive you as a person has changed. And so then when you layer on a diagnosis, it's like a completely different thing, right? And I think that's why that's also why we see such difficulty in treating veterans, because I think like a lot of y'all really struggle, and it's because the game that y'all are playing is like different. Like you have a different character now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't think there's ever like actual like end goal to this as far as like a cure goes. There's just a better mental like well-being to this is all we can strive for.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of polite disagreement. First time in the conversation.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're shooting for a cure.
I mean, eventually, yes,
Yeah.
that is the end goal. But when it comes to like mental health, like our goal is to decrease.
Yeah. No, I think your goal is completely reasonable. You know what the difference is between your goal and my goal?
Mm-hmm.
You've lived through it. I haven't.
Sure.
So hope and optimism is easy for me, completely different for you. Right? Harm reduction, striving for better every day. I think it's the right attitude. Mm-hmm. Although I'm naive enough to really believe that we can get back to 100%, and not even back. I think back to 100% isn't right. It's a new 100%. Like I'm not, anyway.
I can see that approach. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's because you've lived it and I haven't, which I think is completely fair. But I think at the end of the day, what we're doing today, tomorrow, and over the next 10 months is the same, right? Whether we're talking my path or your path. It's still just putting in the work and striving for improvement and doing what you can. I feel like we're kind of at a good pausing point. Do you have any questions? I thought I'd give you a chance to ask questions. I feel really like my eyes have been opened and we've learned a lot. I know we haven't talked too much in detail about practically what y'all do, but I think it's I think you mentioned the events and I think we heard from you.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need more detail personally. I think it's just show up, and I think you guys, the magic is kind of baked in. That's really what I'm getting the vibe of.
Yeah, it's all there. I don't believe I have any questions, not off the top of my head, but I really do appreciate you and your time. It's been a pleasure here, man. If you want to continue forward with anything else, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I think I know this is part of what your job is, but I think we're gonna try to work together. And
that'd be perfect. Yeah.
We've done a lot of stuff in terms of IRB studies and peer support and things like that. So I think one thing we've managed to do very successfully is develop a curriculum that has very good outcomes. So our pilot study had 1,493 people in it, and we saw really good outcomes. And so we're going to try to support y'all in some way. I don't know what that looks like. It's not my domain, but
it doesn't matter what it looks like. The fact that it's making its intentions to make an impact on a population is all that matters.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming, Seth.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good luck with everything and enjoy your tournament. What is it, this Sunday, right?
It is this Sunday, correct. I can share some information for y'all if you want.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Tell us about, and tell us about where to find you for your fundraiser.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd probably be easier if I shot over these links to y'all's Discord, to be honest. But yeah, so Sunday, let me pull the flyer up. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared.
That's okay, dude. I'm pretty sure we have a pretty engaged audience, so I think it is important to just take a second to share it now, but we can always push it across our channels later. But I think it's strike while the iron is hot, bro. Stress, impulsivity. Do it now, Seth. Do it now.
Do it now. Alrighty. So our event on Sunday is it's Saturday and Sunday. That's November the 9th and 10th. It's the Warrior Gamer Duel of Champions. It's Veteran Day Invitational in partnership with Syracuse University. We will be playing Rocket League. There's 3 divisions. It's military and veteran division. So that would be your military branches. We're going to have the Coast Guard, Navy, Army Esports, Regiment Gaming, and there's one other one.
Okay.
Space Force is going to be out there. They actually have an esports team. So
that's cool.
That is actually pretty cool. Then we have a collegiate division, and we're going to have a youth division. So that's going to consist of local high schools there in New York that are invited to participate in that event. If you're interested in that, you can find the flyer on our website at warriorgamerfoundation.org. Now, the next event that we have for Sunday as well on November 10th is the Veterans Day Weekend Gaming event. It is called Gamers and Guardians. It is from 1 to 4 p.m. PST. It is available to veterans in active duty and their families. You can come play, compete, and celebrate with the community. You can join some of the favorite streamers. We're going to invite out some pretty decent-sized influencers. I haven't seen the list. The organizer shot this over to me. So
cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then each game has a prize pool that you can be playing for. Like I stated before, we're going to be playing Apex Legends. We're going to be playing Party Animals, Fall Guys. Each game will have a prize pool. And then 50% of the proceeds that are raised during the stream support veterans charities. That would be us, Warrior Gamer, and Call of Duty Endowment is also the other charity that this will go to. And the other 50% of that will be going towards the prize pool. This will be streamed live on the Gamers and Guardians Twitch stream. The flyer and the sign up available. If you are a veteran and you're interested, you're more than welcome to join us.
Cool. Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Seth, for coming on
Thank you.
today, sharing the work that you do. I mean, I'm grateful that you exist in the world today.
Appreciate
And
that.
You know,
I really do.
because I think a lot of people need what you have to share. So thank you for doing that work, man. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you
care,
so
buddy.
much. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay. So what was that like, chat? You guys, yeah, so interesting. So interesting. My mind is really whirling in terms of like, honestly, I'm thinking about curriculum development and training programs and stuff like that. Like I think some of the stuff that we kind of do over at HGI, like I think there's like the Healthy Gamer Institute where we educate clinicians. Because I think there's something, you know, a big problem with veteran mental health is that the peer support stuff doesn't get integrated into the psychiatric treatment. I think that's a huge problem that we kind of really take for granted. Like, and then I think there's just some fundamental things that I'm kind of thinking about. I think there's a lot that can actually be done. So, and I think a lot of that work that I feel confident about is because of the work that we do, right? So I think the other really interesting thing is that how much overlap there is between issues that veterans face and how common those issues are in our community. So numbness, feeling like an outsider, social anxiety, right? Like this whole like, I feel numb, so the only time I feel alive is when I'm in survival mode or when I'm watching anime. And then, of course, the gaming is an escape. We didn't talk too much about gaming, but I think that there's a lot of good stuff there's a lot that we've learned about things like gaming addiction and a lot of stuff that we've learned from this community about finding social connections, struggling with loneliness. You know, I think there's a lot that I think we can package in some way. Now, whether that ever ends up happening or what role we play in that, who knows? But from a theoretical standpoint, I'm super optimistic about it. Yeah. What did y'all think? How to cope with an election loss? Oh my God. If you guys want to talk about politics, I will make an exception like once. So we don't talk about politics, and at the same time, I'm really struggling to cope with the results. I'm absolutely terrified. Use the word, we could use words of reassurance. Okay. So, if y'all want to talk politics, we can talk politics. So, a couple of disclaimers that I'm going to toss out. The first is that why am I willing to talk about politics? So I think that we're a mental health channel. And so why would we talk about politics? Well, people in chat are saying, I'm absolutely terrified. I'm scared of the future. I'm scared for people that I love. So like this becomes mental health today, right? So we're not even necessarily talking about politics. We're talking about mental health. So we're all for talking about mental health. And today of many days throughout the year, I think there's a very tight tie between these two things. Second thing that I want to say is I'm not going to share what my political beliefs are. I'm not going to share who I voted for. I don't think it's relevant to the discussion. And the reason for that is that it's not our job to take political sides. Or at least not yet. Maybe that'll change one day. But I also want y'all to think about, as I'm going to say things, there's a decent chance that I'll trigger people on both sides. Chance, I don't know, right? And so I think part of the problem that we see is that if I say I am pro this person, or if I say that I am anti this person, then what that does is changes the way that you receive what I say. This is half the problem with politics right now to begin with. Because if someone identifies as a particular political belief, then we automatically judge them. Right? Like, it changes everything that comes in. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we've seen and why we see so much political divisiveness is because we have such a preconceived set of some scars that just activate when someone says I'm conservative or I'm liberal. Now, as to what happened, as I'm sure you all know, Donald Trump won the election, and he won the popular vote as a Republican for the first time since 2004. I think the last time the Republicans won the popular vote was, I think in 2004. So I think it was Bush. So here's what I think is going on. And I think like this needs to be like taken pretty seriously. So the first problem in the world today is that we don't actually care about what people who disagree with us believe. So if you look at like both sides, I have members in my family who are die hard for Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump. We're talking about like in the same household at dinner time, there is so much separate. Like I have people in my family who are like die hard for either side. So here's what I have observed. The problem with politics right now is no one cares to understand why someone believes something that you don't believe. The most common thing that I hear is, I don't know, like, how can people be so stupid? It's so simple. It's such, literally, I had a conversation yesterday with a family member of mine who was like, it's common sense. It's common sense, common sense, common sense. Everyone thinks that everyone else, or the opposite side, is an idiot. No one is striving to understand. And I say this as someone who's like not a great couples therapist, but like I've done couples therapy for people, for marriages that fall apart and for marriages that succeed. The most important thing is understanding the other person's perspective. If you want to make something work, you have to understand the other person's perspective. Now, here's what's going to happen when I say that, right? So what I want y'all to do more than anything else, forget about what I'm saying. Don't forget about what I'm saying, but pay attention to your reaction to what I say. So I would bet money that there's a good chunk of y'all out there that say, okay, the most important thing is to understand the other person's perspective. There's a good chunk of y'all out there that will mentally think, I'm fine understanding their perspective. They're the ones who don't want to understand ours. They're the ones that are closed-minded. They're the ones that don't care about immigrants or are worried about the woke mind virus or don't care about traditional values, or they're the ones that are ruining Dragon Age Veilguard by adding random crap into it. Right? So there's like, I'm okay. I'm open-minded. They're the ones that are not open-minded, which, by the way, is exactly what you see in couples therapy. This person is not willing to, this person is not listening to me. They're not willing to understand my perspective. They're always thinking about their own thoughts. Okay? So I think that there's a couple of like really serious, like interesting things. So I say this scientifically. Okay? I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. I'm not trying to criticize. But I think Democrats, there's one really interesting thing that happened with the Republicans and Trump and did not happen with the Democrats. And that was a really open primary process. So I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just pointing this out, right? So like if you look at what happened in the primaries, there were many allegations in 2016 that the Democratic Party basically had decided on Hillary Clinton. And then there was a lot of like, there were some allegations that things weren't like fair in the primaries in terms of the DNC supporting Clinton over people like Bernie Sanders. And what happened in the Republican primaries? Trump showed up, was it like polling at 4%, and then went through the gauntlet of primary process and rose to the top. He knocked out everybody else. And this time there was a primary process. He was just so dominant. So the first thing that I think, and this is like, I'm not trying to say that this is good or bad or blaming the Democrats or whatever. I'm just saying if we look at it scientifically, one group had a pretty robust primary process, and the other group did not. And so what does that do, right? What do you think a primary process does? A primary process is a testing ground for the opinions of the people. That's what it is. It's like a trial run for an election. So I think this was pretty significant. So it's also shocking that 15 million fewer Democratic votes in 2024 election versus 2020 election. 15 million fewer Democrats stayed home. So we're not talking about voter turnout being higher. We're talking about voter turnout being substantially lower. Right? So it's like, that's really interesting. So this is just one data point. I'm not a political theorist. I'm not a political scientist. I don't understand government. I don't understand this stuff. But just as a simple looking at the data, I see two very different things in terms of how the candidate was selected. And I wonder if that has an impact, right? That's for y'all to decide and people who are more knowledgeable than me to decide. It is a data point that I think is interesting. It is a data point that I believe is significant. But as a scientist, we don't draw a conclusion, right? We just say this is an observation. Now this observation needs to be turned into a hypothesis, tested, understood, analyzed, etc. So please do not take this as, oh, the reason that Trump won is because Harris didn't go through a primary. What I'm observing is that if you had a primary process, does a primary process select for the strongest candidate to win a national election? That is the question. Okay? Now, the assumption is yes, but we don't know that. Right? We don't know that. I haven't looked at 40 years of primaries and analyzed them and determined that, oh, okay, it actually doesn't. The two may not be correlated. Because the process of winning a primary may involve selecting across certain criteria that don't translate over to the general election. Very possible. Okay? That's the first thing. Second thing that I think, I'm going to show y'all a couple of clips. And I'm going to invoke a couple of really, really terrible things that are going to trigger people, but let's go. So this is one of the, I commented about this earlier. Okay, so I want y'all to, so a couple of years ago, there was, I was listening to this interview, okay, and this is an interview with Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson, okay, so like, please don't, I'm like going to show Jordan Peterson on our stream. I think the dude is actually like a really good psychologist. So like I learned a lot from his course on personality, I think is excellent. So I'm not espousing or saying that his political beliefs are correct or whatever, but I think there are some things that he's like really good at. And I think this is one of those observations.
Can I ask a
Trump is like, why can't I get
question
this?
about this?
Yes,
I mean, I've been
please.
listening to all of this about Trump and watching how this
This is in
conversations go in the U.S.
2018, I
have
think.
one question about it. I mean, there's all these people in the U.S. who are on the conservative side who are aligned with Trump for all sorts of reasons. And there's all this tension around his presidency and attempts to pull him out of his office for various reasons. And like, what do you think will happen if that comes to pass? What do you think will happen to these people that have identified with Trump? And like, how is it that Democratic types, for example, are holding out their hand to say to these conservative types, sort of like, welcome back into the fold? Because it looks to me, from an outsider's perspective, that your country is polarizing in a way that's not good, and that, you know, people are going after Trump. And I understand that. It's not like I don't understand that. But there's all these people that elected him and that are identified with him, and they're not taking this well, you know. And so, well, they're not. They're not. It's not. And you know, you might not think they're very bright and all of that, and you know, they're backwards and all of those things. But you know, you need to have respect for the rest of your citizens, and if your country isn't going to pull itself apart. And I really see this happening from an outsider's perspective when I come down here. And I lived in the States for a while, and it wasn't like this before.
If he was just a regular Republican president with Republican policies, I would say you would have a point. But what is so alarming is the assault on democratic norms.
Okay, so already, I don't know if you guys were paying attention, he did not, no one addresses his question. No one gives him an answer. Right? So like this is what I think happened. So I think what happened is there is a very, very vocal minority. I mean, sorry, a very silent majority. Sorry, not vocal minority. And sorry if I'm triggering y'all. If you guys think this is the worst stream of the year, fair enough. Right? I think it's relevant and people are asking, so I'm okay. Like, so this is what I think is going on. So Peterson made a great point. There's a bunch of idiots, and I'm not saying they are stupid or aren't stupid. I'm not commenting on that. Right? There's this perception that there's all these stupid people out there who voted for Trump in 2016. And I don't even think he's saying, like, this has nothing to do with his belief on trans or whatever the fuck. He's like, what is your... There was a gigantic chunk of people who elected this guy. What are y'all going to do to engage with them? And then it goes back to like, oh, this is a threat to democracy and all that kind of crap. Right? And I'm not saying that it isn't. I'm saying he is fascist or isn't fascist, not my area of expertise. And I think the same thing happened this year. So I think what happened this year is that the conversation got dominated by certain things. The media conversation. And there's another great... So if we're speedrunning getting canceled, let's keep going by looking at this. Okay? So here's another clip that I saw that I thought was really interesting.
He's won the national popular vote for the first time for a Republican for the first time since 2004. This is a big deal. This isn't backing into the office. This is a mandate to do what you said you were going to do. Get the economy working again for regular working class Americans, fix immigration, try to get crime under control, try to reduce the chaos in the world. This is a mandate from the American people to do that. I think I'm interpreting the results tonight as the revenge of just the regular old working class American, the anonymous American who has been crushed, insulted, condescended to. They're not garbage. They're not Nazis. They're just regular people who get up and go to work every day and are trying to make a better life for their kids, and they feel like they have been told to just shut up when they have complained about the things that are hurting them in their own lives. I also feel like this election, as we sit here and pour over this tonight, is something of an indictment of the political information complex. I mean, we've been sitting around here for the last couple of weeks, and the story that was portrayed was not true. I mean, we were told Puerto Rico was going to change the election. Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley voters, women lying to their husbands. Before that, it was Tim Walz and the camo hats. Night after night after night, we were told all these things and gimmicks were going to somehow push Harris over the line, and we were just ignoring the fundamentals. Inflation, people feeling like that they were barely able to tread water at best. That was the fundamentals of the election. And so I think that both parties should always look at the results of an election and figure out what went right and what went wrong. But I think for all of us who cover elections and talk about elections and do this on a day-to-day basis, we have to figure out how to understand, talk to, and listen to the half of the country that rose up tonight and said, we've had enough.
So I think this is also a really interesting take. Right? So I think that this is where I've seen this happen. I've been the beneficiary and the victim of it. So I want y'all to understand that what you receive on the internet is not reality. Here is what gets selected for. So we have to take like kind of a big step back. So if we look at these like media companies and stuff like that, like let's say CNN, Fox News, whatever. Everyone is fighting for your attention because your attention means money. That is how all of these companies make money. Your attention. What you choose to do today determines whether an author gets paid, whether Fox News makes money, whether advertisers show up on Twitter, whether TikTok makes money, whether I make money, whether Google makes money, whether Twitch makes money. Everything, all of the money in the world today is getting revolved around what you are paying attention to. And it is literally the life and death of companies and industries. So there's one observation that I've made. The internet loves a delta. What does that mean? So the internet loves a really good person that is found out to be bad. The real internet really loves a really bad person who turns out to be good. Human beings, so this is like neuroscientific, human beings get acclimatized and desensitized to the same stimulus over and over and over again. That's why you can walk into a party and it seems really loud at the very, very beginning, but within a few moments, your brain literally tones down the volume on a constant noise. But if someone yells or a glass breaks, then all of our attention turns to it. So we are biologically wired to pay attention to changes. And so how does everyone keep our attention? If we say the same thing over and over and over again, no one will watch us and my company will die. So what does the company do? Oh, this comedian made this comment. So now Puerto Ricans, now everything has changed. Trump was winning, but now Puerto Ricans are going to do this. Oh, now something has happened in Gaza. So now everything has changed. Now everything has changed. Now everything has changed. Because we as human beings don't listen to the same crap over and over and over again. We always need novelty. And what is the simplest form of novelty? Change. Right? So we see this right now going on with Mr. Beast. And I'm not commenting about, I have no idea what the guy did do, didn't do, what's right, what's wrong. I'm not passing judgment on that. Right? I saw that there was some report or something where people were like, they had a third-party law firm investigate them and they found isolated incidents. And everyone is like up in arms over this. So one thing that I'm just curious about, I'm not trying to say pro or con or whatever. Maybe I'm opening up another can of worms. But let's say that that was the truth. How do we receive that information, right? So let's say that there were isolated incidents. Scenario number one is there's isolated incidents. Scenario number two is that there was some pervasive negligence or malice or whatever. If the first thing was true, and then they do a third party, let's say they did everything right, and this is the finding, are we going to accept that? Of course not. And this is what we love, right? We love anyone who is in one direction and gets pulled in a different direction. So I love also that this person called out the media for being a part of this process. We are also a part of this process because of the way that we receive information. People on the internet usually don't know what they're talking about. Like that's like pretty common. I saw a study recently that 95% of short form content about ADHD is incorrect. 95%. We don't know what we're talking about on the internet. Everyone is sure on the internet and no one actually knows anything. Very few people actually know stuff. And usually what happens, you can look at like Reddit and you'll see this. So sometimes I lurk in a particular subreddit where people regard me as an expert in this topic, and I lurk on a particular subreddit, and I participate. And it's really interesting. I've been running this internal experiment for about 4 years, where sometimes I'll respond. No one knows who I am. Sometimes my response is the top voted comment. Sometimes it's the bottom voted comment. The difference is how simple and memeish it is. The more depth, the more nuance, the more information I add to the subject, the lower it gets voted. And it's not like it gets negatively voted. It just gets like 2 upvotes. And if I say like 6 lines that offer some depth, but also offer a meme, it's going to be the top comment. This is what the internet selects for. It selects for ignorance. It selects for emotional reaction. It selects for change. So I think a big part of like this election and everyone being confused and upset and stuff like that is because we had a really stupid idea that we knew what we were talking about. I mean, people have been saying, well, like if you look at pollsters have been saying for months that things are incredibly close. Incredibly close. And if you look at all these pictures of Harris's rallies and Trump's empty rallies, you're like, how is this even close? There's a huge selection bias. The whole problem with the world today, this is why things are so divisive, is because we're no longer living in the world. I am living in my world. You are living in your world. We're not living in the same world anymore. The assumptions that we come to the table with are completely different. It's like playing a game of chess where I have one board and you have another board. And then I make a move and you're like, where did you, that pawn was eliminated. I took that pawn 3 moves ago. How are you moving that pawn? We're not operating from, and this is what's happening with like these algorithms of echo chambers and online drift. You get on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Facebook or whatever, Meta, I don't like, there's some difference. They're not all the same. But we get indoctrinated into a particular view of the world. This is what's going on in the world. And then another human being is operating off of a different worldview. And so what's happening, and now we get to the really kind of scary part, okay? So I'm not saying that this is good or bad. This is an observation that I'm making. This is going to trigger a lot of people. This is just an observation. Has nothing to do with what I do when I wake up in the morning. So right now, what we're starting to see is advocacy based on a shared identity. So we say like, okay, trans rights are really important. Bodily autonomy is really important. Right? Minority rights are really important. Me Too movement. Gamers are really important. Millennials are really important. Gen Z is really important. Gen X is really important. So something subtle has happened. As we started to learn about the patriarchal structure, and as we discovered that the patriarchal structure both helps and harms men, generally speaking, though, the patriarchal structure helps some men way more than most men. I'm not an expert in the patriarchy. Whether you agree with it, disagree with it, we can have that conversation. Here's just what I've observed. So in this conversation of advocacy, there is one group that is absent. Can you guess who that group is? Anyone? Who's absent? When we talk about, right? So people are saying furries. So right now, this is just what I've seen, right? So there's absolutely evidence that men have it better in many ways than women. And I think a lot of this push for equality makes a lot of sense. So I think we should absolutely make STEM fields more welcoming to women. Absolutely, 100%. We should not tolerate this. I think we should make the gaming space more welcome to women. I think we should see less misogyny, less racism, less homophobia, transphobia, call it whatever you want. I think everyone should be able to, I think when we're talking about playing games, I think every human being on the planet should have the right to sit down after a hard day of work, play a video game, and have a good time. I'm all for that. I'm a father of daughters. I want them to live in an equal world. So someone once asked me, are you a feminist? And I asked them, what does that mean? Because I hear different, what does the term mean, right? Because that's how I try to understand. And I said, I'm in favor of equality for all peoples. Does that make me a feminist? I'm happy to say that's a belief. I think everyone should have equality. I think equality is great. Equality is good. Does that make me a feminist? And I think what I've seen, and it's really scary, right? So I've seen 80% of suicides being men. I've seen suicides getting worse. I've seen addiction rates that are 3 to 4 times worse for men. I've seen prisons that are full of men. Who's advocating for them? Now, here's the real problem, is that if you try to advocate for them, you get shouted down. Because there's this idea that since the patriarchy is beneficial to men, men don't need a seat at the table, because the whole point of having supporting these other voices is because there's a power imbalance between men and women, or men and white people and minorities, whatever. So the majority person doesn't deserve a seat at the table because we're trying to correct this imbalance. I think there's some merit to that argument, right? So like if things are need to be corrected because one group has an advantage over another group, fair enough. I think that's valid. I think we should support women in STEM, like I said. At the same time, just because this group of men is advantaged, CEOs are more likely to be over 6 feet tall. Fair enough. Should we have more height equality in corporate boardrooms? I'm all for it. But just because really tall, financially successful men who are CEOs are doing great for themselves in our patriarchal society does not mean that 90% of people who end up in jail, those guys are getting screwed. Number one demographic for workplace injuries, men. What are we doing for safer workplaces? Is that a men's issue? Are we advocating for that? 60%, I think ballpark, 60% of women, 60% of people who graduate from college are women. Or do we have any male-only scholarships? No, we don't need those because men have so many advantages. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's a nuanced issue and both can be true. I think that sometimes men need help and sometimes women need help. I think inequality exists in the world, and we should strive for equality. I don't think the world makes it so that one demographic of people is immune to discrimination. And even as a man, if I advocate for men in this way, people will get mad at me because they'll say, what do you mean? So I think what's going on right now, this is really scary. I think men are losing their voice because we can't advocate for ourselves. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed a seat at the table because other people have it worse. And I think that used to be true. And it still is true. But the gap is shrinking. So you can look at data on mental health. So I talked about suicidality and I talked about addiction. But women are more likely to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with a mood disorder. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. More likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder. So we all get screwed, depending on our gender, with what we're prone to in terms of mental illness. The really scary thing is we are starting to see equality in mental illness. Rates of addiction and suicide, I don't know about suicide. Rates of addiction are increasing in women. Rates of body dysmorphia are increasing in men. We're seeing more, I think, diagnoses of cluster B, narcissism, sociopathic kind of women, and we're seeing more borderline men. Things are evening out, at least in terms of mental illness. So I think what we saw in this election is super, super scary. But the majority of people in the United States voted for Donald Trump. And I'm not saying that that in and of itself is scary. I think what's scary is that this group of people showed up, and they're there. They've been there. Jordan Peterson pointed them out 6 years ago. And he's like, what's your plan to engage with these people? We don't give them a voice. We don't allow them to have a voice. I want y'all, and the great example of this is watch what happens to me when I say this. When someone says, I don't have a voice, and the society says, you are wrong, you do have a voice, they're taking away my voice. This is something, by the way, that I learned as a psychiatrist from my female patients. I started to see what it was like to lose your voice. When you speak and you say, this is my experience, and no one is letting me speak. And then people are like, yeah, we are letting you speak. You're just doing a bad job, or you're not doing it right, or whatever. And I think what happened is a huge group of disenfranchised, probably men, voted for Donald Trump. And the reason that we all got caught off guard is because when they open their mouths, we don't listen. If they say something, they get called Nazis. They get called whatever, negative thing, right? Because we love to do that for Trump supporters. And I do think there are some Nazis that are Trump supporters. I don't think Nazis are like, I don't think it's my understanding of the political party is that it's not great. But the whole point is that there's a whole nuance that no one is willing to explore. I'll share one last thing. I think this is really interesting. So this is where I'm probably the least knowledgeable. But as a minority man, I won't say which, one candidate worked really, really hard to get my vote, and one candidate did not. I'm not going to say which is which. You guys think about your own experience. There was a very interesting change in the way, especially towards the last couple of months in the election, who was courting votes from whom. And I personally got courted way harder by one candidate than by someone else, by the other candidate. I won't say which one. And I think that that's like, it's really significant. I think that there's a whole like majority of, literally majority or a plurality of people that voted this dude in. Now, what does that mean for us? Does this mean the world is going to end? Like, I don't know. He's been president before and things were interesting. I think from my perspective, it doesn't change much about what I'm going to do. Like in the last year, I've been to a Democratic White House and I've met with 2 Republican senators and 3 Republican congressmen or their offices. So I think thankfully I'm lucky because I don't have to pick a side, because the side that I'm on is one of the few things, thank God, that is a bipartisan issue. Everyone agrees that addiction is bad. Everyone agrees that technology is a serious concern for our mental health. Now, you can get upset with either party for their representation of that. It's not my place to say that they're doing a good job or a bad job. I just know that I'm going to continue doing the work that I'm going to do, which is advocating for mental health. So we were at Capitol Hill a couple weeks ago, and I was advocating for $2.5 billion of funding to train addiction workforce professionals. I'm happy to do that work. I'm proud of doing that work. I don't care. I mean, on some level, I'm sure it's important, but like for me, like advocating for that is like easy. That's not going to change. I don't care who's in the White House. I'm going to continue advocating for y'all, try to make the world a better place, and try to make people like improves people's mental health. So for me, and I think my life, I'm sure will be drastically different because of who's in office. As for what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on what my job is. I'm going to do my best to reserve judgment and saying, it's not my place to say that Kamala Harris didn't run a good campaign or Trump did run a good campaign or one person is right or one person is wrong or whatever. I think the main thing that I really want y'all to, what I really think we should pay attention to is that there's a whole group of people that we're not engaging in the open political discourse. And those people showed up to vote. And I'm not even saying that they're men or women or whatever. Like 51% of the popular vote plus went to Trump, which means that there's a very, very serious misunderstanding of what people's experiences are in this country, what people care about in this country, what actually drives them to vote. We got to stop paying attention to TikTok, which, by the way, who even knows if there's like really some kind of political manipulation and algorithm shifting and destabilization from all this Israel-Palestine stuff. Like, I have no idea how much of that is like me smoking my conspiracy theory pipe and how much of that is legitimate. I have no clue. Allegations of it. That doesn't mean it's true. Doesn't mean it's false. And if you think you know that it is true or false and you have not analyzed TikTok's algorithms, you probably don't know the right answer. I know we love to think, so this is what's really wild. The brain is designed to make you think you know something when you're ignorant. That's literally what the brain is designed to do. Because if you think about it, the world is full of uncertainty. No brain on the planet knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And yet we get up and we have to live our lives. We have to live our lives based on assumptions, on this idea of knowledge that when I go to work, the building will be there. I don't know that it's going to be there. That when I come home, the house will be there. I stop on my way home by the grocery store, assuming that I will have a kitchen when I get back. I don't actually verify that before I go to the grocery store. So we are really good at believing we have knowledge when truly we're ignorant. That's what we're designed to do. And I think at this point, this biological adaptation, this evolutionary thing, we're starting to see a very interesting critical point in humanity, where the way that we've evolved, we've learned how to exploit our evolution. And it is harming us. Evolution used to keep us alive, used to help us. At this point, people are figuring out using video games, social media, doom scrolling, pornography, whatever. We're learning how to exploit it for political gain, for financial gain, for all kinds of stuff. So the biggest thing that we need to do, probably the only real thing that I feel strongly about, is we need to be better ourselves. We need to be more thoughtful about our ignorance. And you can choose to dislike whoever you want to dislike. You want to dislike Jordan Peterson. You want to dislike Donald Trump. You want to dislike Hassan. You want to dislike Destiny. You want to dislike Mr. Beast. You want to dislike Lex Friedman. You want to dislike Joe Rogan, whatever. You can dislike all those people. But how much do you really know about them? What are your sources of information? Because most of what I see on the internet is one hell of a circle jerk. So I'll give you all just one example of this. Let me see if I can find it. So there's sometimes when I talk to people who, let me find this actually. I want to pull this up. Give me a second. Okay. Damn it. Okay. Give me a second. Hold on. I want to show you all this website. And once again, I'm not trying to platform anything here. So sometimes I work with people who are like incels and black pillars, right? And I try to help them develop hope and reintegrate into society and become confident in themselves. And so oftentimes what will happen is when I talk to them about, we'll get into science because a lot of them like to talk about science. And they'll direct me to this website, which is the Scientific Black Pill, which is a list of all of the papers and a summary of research supporting the idea that black pill is correct. So they say, but Dr. K, look at all this stuff. These are all peer-reviewed scientific studies that show that black pill is correct, right? All these incel beliefs, black pill beliefs, hypergamy, crime, stoicism, looks, whatever. They look at all this stuff. And they say, here's all the data. And a lot of those studies are actually faithfully represented on the wiki. I've looked at them. The problem is that this is a selection bias. This is all of the studies that support this view. This doesn't include any of the studies that don't support this view. So, for example, this is a great textbook. The Cambridge Handbook of Personal Relationships. And there's a ton of studies in here about how human beings mate, how human beings meet, how human beings fall in love. But there's nothing in there about black pill. But all that stuff is true too. So right now what's going on the internet is that everyone believes that they have truth, right? Because that's what you see over and over and over again. But it's an incomplete picture. There's a huge selection bias. So what do I think we need to do? The first thing, I'm not saying that this should be done or should not be done. But one thing that I think needs to happen, I think this is probably good, is if you want to win an election, you need to try to understand who's voting. Everyone thinks, oh, Trump won the election. Trump didn't win the election. Harris didn't lose the election. Voters choose who wins and loses. Voters are the ones that decide. Presuming that our democracy is intact, which you can make an argument against, and I'm not an expert in that either. So assuming that the voting was like legitimate, which is a pretty big assumption. And I think the basic problem is that we're not interested in like listening to voters anymore. We're not interested in listening to people who disagree with us. We're not interested in understanding their perspective because we're right and they're wrong. And we didn't know who these people were. We didn't pay attention to them. They elected Trump in 2016. They elected him in 2024. So I think we should listen to what the experiences of people are like. I think we should try to have compassion for people that we disagree with. And you can get super upset about your particular issue. And like, there's certain issues that really upset me in this election. There's certain things that I feel very strongly about. Like the one thing that I'll say is like, I think that from a medical professional standpoint, like access to healthcare is really important. I believe that patients should be able to make decisions about what happens to them. That's the one thing publicly that I'll state. If you're the patient, you should decide what happens to you. It's one of our core principles of medical training. We call it autonomy, that a patient gets to decide. But I think if you guys really want to understand like how to fix the world and make things better, it's not doubling down on what you already believe. It's about understanding what other people believe. And this is crazy, right? So like that's the idea, that's the thesis that got me to streaming in the first place. That's what we believe in, is that you should talk to people, not about them. And today, arguably, I talked about them. I said people, but I didn't say whether I thought they were good or bad or whatever. Well, this channel is founded on the basic idea that when you talk to a human being and you really try to have compassion for them, you try to have understanding for them, you really try to get a sense of what it's like to live a day in their shoes, that the world becomes a better place. I believe that human beings, this is a co-op game. It's not PvP. We're all in this together. Sometimes there's conflict, but generally speaking, humanity has progressed together. We've gate-kept certain things from certain parts of humanity for periods of time. We've had periods of the caste system, slavery. Nuclear technology is like not all the same all over the world. Like, sure, there's like advances, but generally speaking, human beings, like, it's not like we're gatekeeping farming. We're not gatekeeping antibiotics on the whole. We're not gatekeeping cell phones. We're not gatekeeping water purification. When human beings invent things, they distribute them. So I think we're in this together. We're all in it together. And the most important thing to do is to listen to other people and understand what is going on with them. You may learn something that you didn't realize was correct. Your views could change. And then you may have a clearer picture of really what's going on in the world once you start talking to different kinds of people. And like, that's why, like, I love talking to homeless people, love talking to veterans. I love talking to gamers. I'll talk to incels. I'll talk to people who are very, very devout religious people. I'll talk to atheists. And I think the world becomes enriched, or I become enriched by really listening to them. But that's not what we do. When we talk to people, we have all our minds made up. We're not interested in listening to them. And we just wait for them to stop talking so that we can tell them why they're wrong. And I see this like, Thanksgiving is coming up. Christmas is coming up. I'm going to get this again when I'm hanging out with my family. Because most of the time, they're not interested in listening to each other either. right? Because what happens is if you say, yeah, I support Donald Trump, everyone's like, how could you, this guy who's been convicted of 34 counts of whatever and is a felon and is a fascist and is this and that, everyone will start. And then like, think about what it's like to be on the receiving end. Like that's factually correct, right? So if you support someone who this is factually correct, maybe you believe it's a political prosecution, it's all trumped up charges, whatever. But like, forget about whether it's true or not. Like when someone attacks you with that degree of venom, how open, how willing to listen do you think they are? What do you think happens to you? You get defensive. You're not going to convince this person of anything. And the worst thing is some of their allegations are true. And then what they do is they assign you to his camp. They other you. Right? So we're all about inclusivity. Except for political beliefs. Well, obviously, Dr. K, because some political beliefs are bad. Some political beliefs are fascist. Some political beliefs are anti-democratic. Their side is objectively bad. My side is objectively good. Othering. Tribalism. That's what we're seeing. And the crazy thing is that tribalism is what is responsible for this election. Y'all are the ones that are creating it. When you don't give that person, oftentimes a young man, safety to speak their mind, where do they go? They become a podcast bro. There's nowhere for them to go. So they coalesce in communities amongst themselves because they're not allowed anywhere else. But just because you've ostracized them doesn't mean that they're not going to vote. Doesn't mean that they're not going to continue advocating. Their advocacy goes underground. Their advocacy literally gets ostracized, gets put into an echo chamber, and they get radicalized as a result. You can dislike someone. You can tell them, hey, get the hell out of here. Fair enough. That's your right. You don't have to listen to their vitriol, but they're still going to vote. And you're going to be the one who has to deal with those consequences. And that's why we talk to people. We try to understand them. Right? We believe that generally speaking, human beings are allowed to believe certain things. And that the crazy thing is like, this is what's really wild, is like we ran this grand experiment in our community where we did something that has never been done on the internet. We did something very scary. We created a community that has both women and incels. And this was a mess for a while. It was really nasty. This community became super dangerous, super toxic. People felt hurt. People felt triggered. People felt all kinds of stuff. In our mod team, you guys want to talk about who's the real hero at Healthy Gamer? It's the mod team. Mod team came up with fucking brilliant rule. Probably the best internet moderation rule I have ever heard. And if you want to fix communities on the internet, all you guys need to do is implement this one rule that our mod team came up with. You know what the rule was? Don't talk about people generally. You're not allowed to say women are like this, men are like this, black people are like this, white people are like this, gamers are like this, boomers are like this. You are by all means allowed and encouraged to share your experience. This is my experience. I've been rejected by women these 3 or 4 times. It hurts for these reasons. Or I'm a woman and I get sent dick pics all the time and I feel disgusted. I hate men. That's actually fine. All women are this. All men are this. Not allowed. We started talking about personal experiences, not these abstract generalizations about a group of people. And then something beautiful happened. I'm alone. I've never had a girlfriend. I blah, 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 blah. Some incel posts. And then a woman posts, I'm a conventionally attractive woman. I can get laid whenever I want to, and I feel crippling loneliness. When I walk around, men don't see me. They see through me. They see me as an object. They see me as this particular thing. And then something wild happened. Men in our community were like, this is exactly what my experience is. When I walk down the street, women don't see me. I'm invisible to them. And we discovered something crazy, that a woman who gets laid a lot and a man who's a virgin actually have a shared experience and can demonstrate compassion and understanding towards each other. These are people that if you go to the black pill community, there's no idea, or red pill community, that these two dots can be connected in any way. They're on different planets. They don't see me as a person. They just see me as a vagina. They don't see me as a person. They just see me as a threat. My personhood has been taken away from me. And y'all are responsible for that too, right? Because sure, the mods made the rules, but y'all are the ones that have to have the courage to post, have to have the insight to post, have to have the awareness to be able to describe your experience so that you can step away from the I'm a woman, I get laid, I'm a virgin, I'm a man, to get to the core of the subjective experience, which is what creates a connection with people. And I think that's what we need to do in politics. And it's not advocacy for a particular belief. Like I said, I have particular beliefs that I feel somewhat strongly about, but it's not my place to share those or advocate for those beliefs. That's not what this platform is for. It may change one day. I may decide that, okay, for really mental health and the benefit of humanity, I need to endorse this candidate or whatever. That could change. So I'm not saying that's that way forever. It's just, it's a line that we try really, 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 really hard not to cross and to hopefully never cross. I hope I'll never be pushed to that. I hope I'm lucky enough to be able to advocate for things that, generally speaking, we can all agree on. Like, I'm lucky there. But I think what we really need to do is understand that the majority of people in the United States voted for Donald Trump. That's a reality. Now, the question is, what are we going to do about it? I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about the people who voted for him. What's our plan? If you guys don't like the election, you don't like the results, if you think, oh my God, how do I cope with this negativity? As long as those people are not brought into the fold, as long as we are not all sitting at a table together where those people are trying to understand me and I'm trying to understand them, like, this is going to continue. And I've seen that as a couples therapist. It's like, we need to do couples therapy for conservatives and liberals. We need to get people like talking to each other and understanding each other and problem solving for each other instead of like push-pull. Like, imagine what the world would be like if you're a liberal and there was a conservative who was problem solving for your benefit. Or you were a conservative and there's a liberal who's problem solving for your benefit. What would the world be? And then you will say, oh, that would never happen. No, I've seen it happen. It's crazy actually how close it is. It doesn't take that much, honestly. It's wild. Wild. And it's not very far at all. I think there's that great example of that dude who gives the TED Talk, who's a black guy who goes and like hangs out with KKK members. That guy's like not trained in psychiatry or anything like that. He's not a professional. He just like goes and like hangs out with them. And like there's a lot of stuff that's working towards us. You don't have to study for 40 years and become an expert to build a bridge with another human being. We've evolved to form bridges. That's my take. All right, so I'll ask for feedback, right? So in the spirit of that, I know it's kind of weird. We don't usually talk about politics, and I think it upsets a lot of people. That's why I chose to talk about it. But what do y'all think? Now I'd like to understand your views, right? How do you receive what I said? Is this okay to do? Not okay to do? Should I never do this again? Should I do it again? I'm here to listen and understand. And if y'all tell me, hey, Dr. K, this was a mistake, fair enough. I'm not saying I won't ever do it again, but I'll take that very seriously. Yeah, so like, people are talking about I mean, I see that it looks like the vast majority of people are in favor of this particular thing. We're not going to become a political streamer, okay? So I appreciate the license to talk about this. And it seems like most people like it. Seems like some people don't like it, and I totally respect that too. Right? So for those of y'all that don't like it, I would encourage you to consider that I've streamed for thousands of hours at this point. I've been streaming for 5 years, and I've talked about politics. So interesting. This is creepy, man. Am I back? Like, okay, hold on a second, y'all. Can we agree for a moment that this is creepy? Okay, so it seems on Twitch I never went down, but on YouTube we went down. Like just when I said, is it okay to talk about this? And the universe is like, not on YouTube. Like, what is this, man? Got him. I guess no politics. Yeah, so so people are asking, okay, what do I do? So let's say you're happy let's say you're unhappy with the election. What do I do? What does this mean? What does it mean for climate change? What does it mean for women's rights? What does it mean for all this kind of stuff? I mean, so I think this is where like someone was saying it's a little bit more preachy than mental health, which is fair enough because I'm not an expert in it, so I can't give like a formal lecture. So here's what I'd say. So I think that remember that the human mind takes ignorance and transforms it into knowledge. That's what the human mind does. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we can sure as hell be anxious about it today. We can sure catastrophize about it today. This is what the human mind does. Right? So when ancient humans were going fishing, they didn't know that there were going to be any fish there, but they had to operate practically as if there were fish in the river. So the first thing that I would say is if you're upset about this election, recognize that you don't know what's going to happen. You literally don't know. You can't predict the future. I can't predict the future. I don't know anyone who can reliably predict the future. So as a result, don't fight the battles that haven't happened yet. You have plenty of battles to fight here and now in your own life that are present and in front of you. So could things pitch over to like a catastrophic climate situation that causes the end of humanity? Yes, that could happen. And what are you going to do about it? Only what you can do. Right? So what I would say to y'all is don't lose hope. Humanity thus far has survived, right? There have been, if you think that this election was a catastrophe, there have been all kinds of catastrophes that human beings have dealt with for, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years, right? Like ice ages and meteors and things like that. So first of all, it can be very scary. And when your adrenaline is high, when your cortisol is high, when you're stressed out, you take hypothetical fears and you make them more real. That's what adrenaline does in your brain. It takes a hypothetical and it transforms it into reality. But that's literally governed by a chemical that has a half-life of like 2 minutes. So the first thing that I'd say is do your best to remain calm. And how do you remain calm? You remain calm by acknowledging that I'm in the world today. The future could change. I don't know what's going to happen. And the second way that you remain calm is by acting when a problem does arise. So I want y'all to understand something. Action is the antidote to anxiety. Have you guys ever wondered when someone has a funeral, why so many people bring food? Like I remember when I was young, this really confused me. Casserole ain't going to bring this person back to life. How does it help? And it confused me as a doctor, too. I had a patient who had terminal cancer, had like 10 days to live. And family comes in with food, and they're like, he's not eating, he's not eating, he's not eating. He needs to keep his strength up. And I was like, I don't know if y'all understand. This guy's going to die. There's no amount of food is going to fix that. So what is the mechanism? Why do human beings bring food? It's because we're doing something. Doing something is a biological mechanism of alleviating anxiety. I'm really, really anxious. Oh my God, how's the day going to go? How's the day going to? Oh, and once I actually start, once I do it, it's not as bad as I thought. And it's not that it wasn't as bad as you thought. It's that literally doing something makes the anxiety go away. It's like taking a benzodiazepine. It just makes the anxiety go away, like physiologically, just short circuits and unplugs it. So what's the second thing to do if you're very, very upset about the election? When a problem arises, do something about it. It will both make the world a better place and it will alleviate your anxiety. So if you're really concerned about climate change, instead of upvoting something on the internet about climate change, go and clean up some trash. Go and plant 20 trees. Go and plant 200 trees. Go and do something about it. That's what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the world is going to exist when my kids are my age. I don't know. Could there be a climate collapse? Who knows? What's going to happen with abortion rights? Who knows? But when I have a chance to do something, I am going to do something about it. And the world is the way that it is because a lot of people panic about problems and very few people fix them. There's a really interesting study. Those who support things on social media are less likely to do something in the real world. So it's really interesting. Some philanthropy groups will actually discourage strong social media campaigns. Because what they find is that the size of the social media campaign in some ways raises awareness and increases donations, and in some ways becomes a substitute for action. Because when I spread awareness, I've done my part. I'm upvoting this thing. I'm going to send this link about climate change to 15 friends of mine. Therefore, I'm not going to plant trees. So if you're upset about the state of the world, do something about it. Do it for your own mental health. Go plant some trees, whatever the issue is. Go talk to people. Go listen to people. Go advocate for something. Call your political official. Like, it's super cool. Like, I didn't realize, like, you know, your congressman or your senator, if you just call them and you're like, hey, I want to talk to someone over there, they'll be like, okay, cool. That's part of our job. And it was super cool. Like, I went to Capitol Hill and people were like, where are you from? And they like care about where I'm from. They're like, oh, that's great. You're from there? Like, oh yeah, there's a really great restaurant there. And I was like, why are we talking about this? Right? So I'd say those are the two things. Recognize that you can't see the future. And when a problem arises, actually do something about it. Do what you can do. It'll help you feel better at a minimum. And at the maximum, it'll make the world a better place. Okay. Thank y'all very much for the opportunity to rant a little bit, rave a little bit. I hope you guys really enjoyed the Warrior Gamer Foundation stream. Seth was awesome. Definitely recommend that y'all check out, you know, their stuff. And if you guys want to, if you're a veteran and want to participate in a Rocket League or Apex tournament, like, go for it. Right? I think it's great. And we're trying to support some of the work that we're doing. I don't know if y'all noticed, but we here at HG also started doing things about it. And doing things means more than making content. Right? We've been trying to do things about it for a long time. And we started off doing things by making content. And then we started doing things by developing a coaching program. And then we started doing things by making guides. And now we're doing things by going and trying to advocate for $2.5 billion of funding to make sure that when y'all need a psychiatrist or therapist, that treatment is available, that your mental health professionals are well trained and understand technology addiction. And we're also going to try to support the work of the Warrior Gamer Foundation. So I wouldn't ask y'all to do anything that, well, I don't know, maybe one day I will ask you, or maybe I have. I probably have asked you to do something that I wouldn't do. But in general, when we tell y'all to go and do something, to try to listen to other people, to try to make the world a slightly better place, it's stuff that we do ourselves. And like the whole reason that I advocate for it, because it feels good, man. It's cool. Like it's cool to go and try to like make a difference in the world. And sometimes you actually succeed, which feels great. So, yeah. All right. Yeah, so someone, Sugar's saying, I do so much. I mean, I do a lot, but remember that HG is a whole operation, right? We have like our awesome mods, but like there's a huge team here. And it's not just me. I'm just the face. I'm the one who gets to take the credit. But I mean, there's a ton of people who do a lot of work here who don't get recognized nearly enough. A lot of them have social anxiety and don't like to show up because they're us. But anyway, thank y'all very much for coming today. And we'll see y'all when we see y'all. Oh, yeah. So I think for those of y'all that signed up, Addictions Workshop is this weekend. I think it's going to be lit. Let me just make sure I have that right. Yeah. Are we doing? Yeah. So I don't think we're streaming. So there's Addictions Workshop. And then I have a couple of podcasts next week. Oh. Got a good one coming. And then next Friday, we are doing our membership stream on self-love. So that's going to be good. So it's interesting. So if y'all aren't familiar with memberships, and by the way, so, you know, when we, I don't know if you guys know this, but when we do things like go to Capitol Hill, you know, that costs a fair amount of money. We go to conferences and stuff like that. And so, like, you know, that money comes from things like memberships. So for those of y'all that are, when we do advocacy work and things like that, you know, you don't, the senator doesn't pay you to fly you out to come meet with them, right? You got to book that on your own dime. And so I'm just grateful for members and everyone else who's given us money in whatever form that you've given us, because that's the work that we do with it. Memberships is a little bit interesting because they get to vote on what I prepare in terms of lecture topics. And for the first time, they voted for something that I didn't think that I could teach. So they asked for stuff around self-love, and specifically the Anahat chakra, for those of y'all that know what that is, right? So this is the Kundalini system of esoteric meditation that has to do with the chakras. And I do a lot of Agnya chakra or third eye practices, but they were like, what about heart practices? We need self-love. And I was like, that's not my thing. And so I told them originally, I was like, I don't know if I can give this lecture, but thankfully I got inspired one day, and I'm actually super excited about the lecture. I think the lecture is going to be great. It's going to be very, very different. But it's going to be very different from all of the other lectures that are on the internet on self-love. I think I've never seen a lecture quite like this on self-love. But it's also going to be very similar, because we're going to approach self-love not in a touchy-feely compassion, like, oh, like, love yourself, bro, but in like a technical neuroscience, like, what is, like, where does self-love come from? And like, all, it's going to be like actually not very touchy-feely at all. It's going to be highly technical, and also some really weird spiritual stuff too. So yeah, that is a members lecture. So a lot of our more in-depth stuff is on there. We're not trying to gatekeep content. I read some of the posts and stuff where people are like, oh my God, HG is trying to gatekeep their help. Everything should be free. It's not really like that. We honestly do, to be completely honest, anytime we have a piece of content. So I filmed something about a week ago that I think is arguably potentially the most useful thing that we'll ever make. And it's absolutely going to be free. So we still try to do most of our best stuff for free. It's just some stuff has a cost. And we've also found that a lot of the deeper dive membership stuff doesn't actually perform well. So it hurts us in some ways because then the YouTube algorithm doesn't like it because it's pretty esoteric. And it's like, I don't know how many people want to understand the Anahat Chakra. I don't know how many people know what it is. So if y'all are interested in that stuff, definitely check it out. If you're not, no big deal. And we're doing the best that we can to try to fund as much free stuff as we can by paid stuff. And that's also one of the reasons why we're very, very, we don't take sponsorships that are tons and tons and tons of money from people. We'd rather just charge money from you and then not be subtly influenced in the way that many influencers are by questionable sponsorship. So we want to steer clear of that. So that's what we decided to do. Take care, everybody.